Tonight, we embark upon an extraordinary narrative, delving into the unparalleled saga of the sole African empire that steadfastly confronted European colonizers, unequivocally asserting its enduring sovereignty. We speak of Ethiopia, a nation that meticulously forged one of Earth's most illustrious civilizations over 3 millennia, while other territories succumbed to the partitioning endeavors of colonial powers. Our exploration encompasses the comprehensive history of a people who, with remarkable tenacity, never yielded, rendering all other accounts of independence comparatively modest. Therefore, we invite you to settle in as we journey through the transformation of a Highland kingdom in the Horn of Africa into a legendary entity. This kingdom meticulously established expansive trading conduits, stretching from the imperial city of Rome to the distant shores of India, concurrently erecting monumental stone obelisks that would astound contemporary structural engineers. It cultivated a distinct form of Christianity, so unique in its theological and liturgical expressions that European missionaries, upon encountering it, expressed profound bewilderment. Ethiopia preserved its autonomy through an unwavering and brilliant resolve for over 3 millennia, even conceiving its own chronological system, seemingly because the conventional Gregorian calendar lacked an adequately Ethiopian character. Furthermore, it remarkably served as the cradle for both humanity's most ancient hominid fossils and its most tenacious empire. Navigating incessant invasions, devastating famines, and the persistent imperative to reaffirm to the global community that Ethiopia extends its supplications to the Almighty, rather than to colonial authorities. Within the elevated plateaus of Africa, where the ethereal morning mist gracefully intertwines with profound ancient secrets, and where the coffee bean first imparted its fragrant promise to humankind, an ancient civilization thrived, its origins so remote that it predated much of recorded history. This is the compelling chronicle of Ethiopia, a land that persistently defied subjugation, never capitulated, and miraculously preserved its autonomy while the remainder of the African continent was meticulously dissected, akin to a vigorously disputed celebratory confection at a colonial diplomatic repast. Our story commences not with the cacophony of clashing weaponry or the resonant rumble of war drums, but with the gentle undulations of waves upon a distant coastline, and the tale of a queen whose unparalleled beauty was purportedly comparable to the celestial luminosity of the stars themselves. However, prior to our introduction to this fabled monarch, let us momentarily pause and envision ourselves gathered beside a cheerfully crackling fire, perhaps partaking in a cup of that very coffee which Ethiopia bestowed upon the world, as we prepare to embark on a temporal expedition spanning more than 3 millennia. The historical trajectory of Ethiopia resembles an ancient river that has flowed ceaselessly for thousands of years, at times surging through magnificent gorges with dramatic intensity, and at other junctures gently meandering through verdant, fertile valleys, yet perpetually advancing. It is a narrative replete with kingdoms that ascended and subsequently declined. Much like the daily cycle of the sun over the majestic Simeon Mountains, it speaks of emperors who proudly asserted their direct lineage from the venerable King Solomon himself, and of a populace that, when confronted by the formidable colonial powers of Europe, essentially conveyed a message of confident self-sufficiency. In the distant past, when the monumental pyramids of Egypt were still regarded as architectural innovations, and the nascent city of Rome was merely a nascent concept in its founders' imaginations, the territory destined to become Ethiopia was already a vibrant hub of human activity. The ancient kingdom of DMT, a name that, despite its phonetic resemblance to a sneeze, represented a remarkably sophisticated polity, flourished in the northern highlands around the 8th century BCE. These early Ethiopian inhabitants already exhibited precursors of the steadfast independence that would indelibly define their descendants. They developed their own intricate writing system, constructed awe-inspiring stone monuments, and likely observed their neighboring civilizations with a tacit assertion of their self-reliance in forging their own societal structures. Nevertheless, it was the formidable kingdom of Aksum that truly propelled Ethiopia onto the global stage of the ancient world, making an entrance of unparalleled grandeur. Emerging around the 1st century CE, Aksum rapidly ascended to become one of the preeminent trading powers of antiquity, standing in formidable parity with empires such as Rome, Persia, and China. The Aksumites were a people who perceived the Red Sea not as an impediment, but as a prosperous maritime thoroughfare. They meticulously constructed a sprawling maritime empire that extended across the Red Sea to the Arabian Peninsula, specifically Yemen. Consequently, their astute merchants became a ubiquitous presence in the bustling ports of India and Sri Lanka, as commonplace as the seasonal monsoon rains. The imperial capital city of Aksum stood as an architectural marvel, capable of inspiring profound admiration in ancient urban planners. Imposing obelisks majestically pierced the azure sky, resembling colossal stone digits pointing heavenward, some exceeding 100 feet in height and meticulously carved from singular blocks of granite. These structures were not merely testaments to imperial vanity, though an element of that was likely present. They served as solemn markers for royal interments and potent emblems of a kingdom's formidable power. The grandest of these obelisks, had its erection been successfully completed, would have surpassed the height of any other edifice constructed in the ancient world. Regrettably, it toppled during its construction, an event that must have constituted the ancient equivalent of an exceptionally costly and conspicuously public engineering failure. One can readily envision the Aksumite monarch surveying the fallen monolith, perhaps uttering expletives roughly translatable to a modern sentiment of profound professional embarrassment. The Aksumites were also among the earliest adherents to Christianity, embracing the faith in the 4th century CE under the reign of King Ezana, thereby establishing Ethiopia as one of the world's inaugural Christian nations. This conversion transcended mere political expediency. It represented a profound spiritual metamorphosis that would inextricably shape Ethiopian identity for millennia. According to historical accounts, a young Syrian Christian named Frumentius, after being shipwrecked on the Ethiopian coast, eventually assumed the role of tutor to the royal princes and progressively introduced Christianity to the imperial court. It is a quintessential narrative illustrating how the most transformative societal shifts sometimes emanate not from military conquest or coercive measures, but from the understated yet profound influence of a dedicated pedagogue. Frumentius subsequently became Ethiopia's first bishop, likely never conceiving that his enduring legacy would resonate over 1,600 years later. However, let us revert to the aforementioned queen, for no comprehensive account of ancient Ethiopia would be complete without acknowledging the legendary Queen of Sheba. While contemporary historians often posit that the Queen of Sheba may have originated from Yemen, or perhaps represents a composite figure of several historical rulers, or even an entirely mythological construct, the Ethiopians have historically disregarded such academic uncertainties in favor of a compelling narrative. They assert her as their own with a conviction born of the adage that possession constitutes 9/10 of the law, even within the realm of ancient history. In accordance with Ethiopian tradition, the Queen of Sheba, known domestically as Queen Makeda, having heard widespread accounts of King Solomon's unparalleled wisdom, resolved to undertake a diplomatic visit to Jerusalem. This was no ordinary royal visit. It was the ancient geopolitical equivalent of a summit meeting between two preeminent global powers. The Queen arrived in Jerusalem accompanied by a caravan so profusely laden with gold, exotic spices, and precious gemstones that it conceivably precipitated the world's first documented traffic congestion. Solomon, not to be outmaneuvered, extended a reception of such unparalleled magnificence that their encounter became the stuff of enduring legend. The Ethiopian rendition of these events becomes particularly intriguing here. According to the Kebra Nagas, or Glory of the Kings, the Queen and Solomon engaged in a romantic liaison that culminated in the birth of a son named Menelik I, who would subsequently establish the foundational lineage of the Ethiopian imperial dynasty. The narrative further posits that upon reaching adulthood, Menelik journeyed to Jerusalem to visit his father, and Solomon, in his sagacious capacity, presented his son with a meticulous replica of the Ark of the Covenant. However, Menelik's accompanying retinue, whether through astute cunning or mischievous intent, surreptitiously exchanged the replica for the authentic Ark. Thus, in accordance with Ethiopian tradition, the genuine Ark of the Covenant has reposed in Ethiopia for the preceding 3,000 years, specifically within the venerable Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion in Aksum. Regardless of one's personal credence in this account, and it is pertinent to note that the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church safeguards this claim with a degree of zealous secrecy that would impress even the most clandestine intelligence agencies, it profoundly illuminates a crucial aspect of Ethiopian identity. This is a nation that has consistently perceived itself as divinely chosen, exceptionally unique, and profoundly connected to the sacred in ways that intrinsically differentiate it from its neighboring polities. It is this unwavering self-assurance that would prove invaluable in the ensuing centuries, particularly when confronted with adversities that would have irrevocably shattered lesser nations. The Aksumite kingdom attained its zenith around the 6th century CE, when King Caleb initiated a formidable military expedition across the Red Sea to Yemen, ostensibly to safeguard persecuted Christians residing there. This endeavor transcended a mere rescue operation. It served as an overt demonstration of Aksum's formidable power and extensive reach. The Aksumites successfully subjugated Yemen and installed a Christian monarch, thereby unequivocally illustrating their capacity to project military might across maritime expanses when strategically imperative. It was a bold and decisive action that emphatically announced to the global community that Aksum was not merely a regional power, but a significant player on the international stage. However, like all great kingdoms, Aksum eventually encountered formidable challenges that rigorously tested its inherent resilience. The ascendance of Islam in the 7th century fundamentally altered the dynamics of Red Sea commerce, as Muslim merchants progressively asserted dominance over the lucrative trade routes that had historically underpinned Aksum's prosperity. Furthermore, climatic shifts, indeed, climate change exerted profound impacts on civilizations long before the advent of modern automobiles contributed to a discernible decline in agricultural productivity. Consequently, The once mighty kingdom that had stood as an equal to imperial Rome gradually began to turn inward, reorienting its focus more towards its highland interior and less upon its formerly expansive maritime trade, and instead focused its energies and resources primarily upon internal affairs and continental commerce. This deliberate shift in national priorities signaled the commencement of an era that historical scholars commonly refer to as the Dark Ages of Ethiopian history. However, to label any epoch of Ethiopia's illustrious past as genuinely dark is perhaps an overstatement, akin to describing a sunset as merely dim, for there invariably remains some enduring luminescence. Throughout this designated period, spanning approximately from the 7th to the 11th centuries, the Ethiopian realm experienced a heightened degree of seclusion from the broader global community. Nevertheless, this very isolation served as a fertile ground, fostering the organic evolution of a distinctly Ethiopian Christian culture, which would ultimately distinguish itself as one of the most singular and profound expressions of faith across the globe. It was within this crucible of separation that Ethiopian Christianity began to forge its unique and defining attributes. The Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, while diligently maintaining its theological and spiritual affiliations with the wider Christian ecumene, concurrently developed its own distinctive liturgical practices, established its unique ecclesiastical calendar, and cultivated its profound understanding of sacred doctrine. During this transformative epoch, Ethiopian monastic communities embarked upon the extraordinary endeavor of sculpting entire sanctuaries directly from the living rock, thereby producing architectural marvels that seemingly defy both the immutable laws of physics and conventional human ingenuity. These awe-inspiring rock-hewn churches, most notably those situated in the sacred precinct of Lalibela, stand as a testament to humanity's most astonishing architectural achievements. One can only ponder the audacious decision to, instead of constructing a conventional edifice upon the earth's surface, meticulously carve a complete church from solid volcanic stone, replete with intricate ornamentation, concealed chambers, and acoustically perfect interiors. Such an undertaking would undoubtedly prompt contemporary civil engineers to consult their computational devices and then, perhaps discreetly, propose the construction of a more modest timber-framed sanctuary as an alternative. Among these magnificent rock-hewn edifices, the most celebrated is undoubtedly the Church of St. George at Lalibela, meticulously chiseled into the precise form of a perfect Greek cross and descending profoundly into the subterranean realm. According to venerable legend, celestial beings descended nightly to continue the arduous construction work initiated by human hands during the day, which can be interpreted either as a sublime expression of fervent spiritual devotion or as the earliest documented instance of entrusting construction projects to ethereal contractors. Regardless of the interpretation, the resulting structure is utterly breathtaking. A sacred edifice that appears to organically emerge from the very bedrock, as if the unyielding stone itself had been persuaded to assume a hallowed form. Yet Ethiopia's period of insularity was not destined to persist indefinitely. In the 12th century, a nascent royal lineage emerged that would profoundly reconfigure the kingdom's political landscape and re-establish its connections with the international community. The Zagwe dynasty, which held sway from approximately 1137 to 1270 CE, signified a geographical relocation of Ethiopian imperial authority from the northern territories surrounding Aksum to the central high plateaus. The Zagwe monarchs were renowned for their monumental building projects and their unwavering patronage of the ecclesiastical institutions, and it was under their enlightened governance that many of Ethiopia's most iconic rock-hewn churches were brought into existence. The most illustrious of the Zagwe sovereigns was King Lalibela, whose regal name now graces the town that hosts Ethiopia's most spectacular assemblage of rock-hewn sanctuaries. King Lalibela, according to revered tradition, was divinely inspired with a vision to establish a new Jerusalem within the elevated Ethiopian highlands. This ambitious project transcended mere religious fervor. It represented a pragmatic response to the prevailing geopolitical reality that Muslim dominion over the Holy Land rendered pilgrimages to Jerusalem exceedingly perilous for Ethiopian Christians. Consequently, King Lalibela resolved to transplant Jerusalem to Ethiopia, complete with sacred edifices bearing the names of their Holy Land counterparts, and a local waterway ceremonially rechristened the River Jordan. The monumental construction of Lalibela's churches represented an undertaking that would pose formidable challenges even to the sophisticated engineering capabilities of the modern era. Each individual church was meticulously sculpted from a monolithic block of volcanic rock, with master craftsmen systematically working downwards from the apex, painstakingly excising stone to fashion walls, structural pillars, window openings, and intricate decorative motifs. The degree of precision demanded by this artistry was truly extraordinary. A single miscalculation could irrevocably compromise years of painstaking labor. It is precisely the sort of ambitious endeavor that would undoubtedly cause medieval occupational safety and health inspectors to brandish their clipboards and express profound incredulity. Under the Zagwe dynasty, there was also a remarkable blossoming of Ethiopian artistic expression and literary endeavors. Ethiopian scribes cultivated a distinctive artistic style of manuscript illumination, masterfully integrating traditional Christian iconography with indigenous artistic conventions. These precious manuscripts, meticulously inscribed upon parchment, meticulously prepared from goat or sheepskin, were adorned with vibrant chromatic palettes and intricate geometric patterns that eloquently reflected both the refined sophistication of Ethiopian artistic culture and the profound spiritual devotion of their creators. The scribes responsible for these exquisite works were not merely transcribing sacred texts. They were actively creating enduring works of art specifically intended to inspire reverence and impart spiritual wisdom, to vivify the divine word through compelling visual aesthetics. However, the reign of the Zagwe dynasty was ultimately finite. In the year 1270 CE, they were supplanted by a new imperial lineage that asserted direct genealogical descent from the legendary King Solomon and the illustrious Queen of Sheba, the Solomonic dynasty. This momentous transition was not merely a change in ruling houses. It represented, at least according to the meticulously crafted propaganda of the new dynasty, a profound restoration of legitimate authority. The Solomonic emperors vociferously contended that the Zagwe had been illegitimate usurpers and that they were now re-establishing the rightful lineage of Ethiopian monarchs, a lineage purportedly stretching back to Menelik I, the fabled progeny of Solomon and Sheba. The progenitor of the reinstated Solomonic dynasty was Yekuno Amlak, whose auspicious name translates to "Let the Lord rise," a phrase that can be interpreted either as a fervent declaration of religious piety or as the ancient equivalent of a compelling political campaign slogan. Yekuno Amlak strategically established his imperial capital within the Central Highlands and initiated the systematic process of extending Ethiopian suzerainty over the contiguous regions. This territorial expansion transcended mere military conquest. It was fundamentally about forging a unified Christian kingdom capable of serving as a steadfast beacon of faith within a geopolitical landscape increasingly dominated by burgeoning Muslim polities. Under the sagacious rule of the Solomonic dynasty, Ethiopia embarked upon what many historians regard as its veritable golden age. The empire significantly expanded its geographical boundaries, developed a highly sophisticated administrative apparatus, and emerged as a formidable geopolitical actor in regional affairs. Ethiopian legions advanced southward into the territories inhabited by the Oromo and Sidama peoples, eastward towards the Somali coastline, and westward into the Sudanese borderlands. This extensive expansion incorporated new ethnic groups, diverse cultural traditions, and novel challenges into the expansive Ethiopian dominion, thereby forging a multifaceted empire sustained by a judicious combination of military might, administrative acumen, and profound religious devotion. One of the most remarkable characteristics of medieval Ethiopia was its notable degree of religious tolerance, particularly when evaluated against the prevailing standards of the era. While the empire officially embraced Christianity, and the emperor was revered as the unwavering defender of the faith, Ethiopian rulers generally permitted their Muslim and adherents of traditional indigenous religions to freely practice their respective beliefs, provided they diligently fulfilled their fiscal obligations and refrained from acts of rebellion. This pragmatic approach to managing religious diversity was partly a matter of political necessity. Governing such a heterogeneous empire mandated a certain degree of adaptive flexibility. However, it also reflected a deep-seated confidence in Ethiopian Christianity, a faith that evidently did not perceive itself as imperiled by the presence of alternative spiritual traditions. The Ethiopian Church, during this flourishing period, developed several distinctive characteristics that clearly differentiated it from other Christian traditions worldwide. Ethiopian Christianity consciously incorporated elements of ancient Jewish law and practice, including specific dietary restrictions, the ritual of circumcision, and the observance of the Sabbath on both Saturday and Sunday. This was not merely an act of uncritical syncretism. Rather, it profoundly reflected the Ethiopian Church's self-perception as the direct heir to ancient Israel, the sacred custodian of the Ark of the Covenant, and the authentic continuation of biblical tradition. Ethiopian Christians perceived themselves not as recent converts to an exogenous religion, but as the rightful inheritors of the most ancient and pristine form of the Abrahamic faith. The 14th and 15th centuries marked the zenith of Ethiopian imperial power and influence, under the formidable reigns of emperors such as Amda Seyon Fantundit Zara Yacob. The Ethiopian Empire solidified its position as a preeminent regional power, commanding considerable respect from its neighboring states and attracting significant attention from distant lands. Ethiopian merchants engaged in extensive trade networks with India, the Arabian Peninsula, and the Mediterranean world, bringing back not only valuable commodities, but also innovative ideas, advanced technologies, and diverse cultural influences that profoundly enriched Ethiopian civilization. It was during this epoch that Ethiopia first captured the imagination of medieval Europe, although the initial perceptions were largely predicated upon hopeful conjecture rather than precise factual intelligence. European Christians, then facing considerable pressure from Muslim expansion across the Mediterranean basin and within the Holy Land, began to circulate captivating rumors of a magnificent Christian kingdom situated somewhere in Africa or Asia, governed by a mysterious monarch known as Prester John. This legendary Christian king was reputedly the sovereign of a vast empire replete with extraordinary wonders, rivers of pure gold, rejuvenating fountains of youth, and formidable armies of fantastical creatures poised to march to the aid of their European co-religionists. The actual reality, as is frequently the case, proved to be considerably more intricate than the embellished legend. Ethiopia was indeed a Christian kingdom, and it was undeniably powerful, but it was also contending with its own internal challenges and possessed its own distinct national priorities. When Portuguese maritime explorers finally established direct contact with Ethiopia in the early 16th century, they discovered not the mythical realm of Prester John, but rather a sophisticated African civilization boasting its own rich cultural heritage, its unique interpretation of Christian doctrine, and its own considered perspectives on engaging with the wider global community. The arrival of the Portuguese in Ethiopia tragically coincided with one of the most perilous periods in the nation's long and storied history. In the nascent years of the 16th century, the Ethiopian Empire found itself confronted by a monumental invasion orchestrated by the Sultanate of Adal, spearheaded by a charismatic and ruthlessly effective military commander known as Ahmad ibn Ibrahim al-Ghazi, more famously dubbed Gragjan the Left-Handed. This was far from being merely another localized border skirmish. It represented an existential threat to the very fabric of Ethiopian civilization. Ahmad Grang's formidable forces, meticulously equipped with advanced firearms acquired from the formidable Ottoman Empire and propelled by an intense religious zeal, swept through the elevated Ethiopian plateaus with the destructive force of a raging wildfire, systematically obliterating sacred churches, incinerating invaluable manuscripts, and coercing widespread conversions to the Islamic faith. The Ethiopian realm found itself grappling with an existential peril, marked by extensive conversions to the Islamic faith. The manner in which Ethiopia confronted this dire predicament laid bare both the inherent strengths and underlying vulnerabilities of its ancient civilization. Emperor Lebna Dengel, caught entirely unprepared by the unprecedented velocity and unbridled aggression of the invading forces, found himself compelled to abandon his imperial capital and wage a desperate, unconventional war from the rugged mountain redoubts. For more than a decade, the very fabric of Ethiopia's sovereignty hovered precariously on the precipice of collapse, as the formidable armies of Grang asserted dominance over the vast majority of the empire's sprawling territories. It was amidst this profoundly somber epoch that the Ethiopian leadership made a momentous decision, one destined to cast a long shadow over future generations. They formally petitioned the distant Portuguese kingdom for crucial military assistance. The Portuguese crown's reaction to this urgent plea was remarkably prompt and unequivocally decisive. A relatively modest contingent, comprising 400 Portuguese musketeers under the intrepid command of Cristóvão da Gama, the distinguished son of the renowned navigator Vasco da Gama, disembarked upon the Ethiopian coastline. From there they embarked on an arduous march inland to rendezvous with the beleaguered Ethiopian resistance. The timely infusion of sophisticated Portuguese firearms and their advanced military acumen proved instrumental in irrevocably shifting the momentum of the protracted conflict, though this decisive intervention was not without its own profound sacrifices. Tragically, Cristóvão da Gama himself was captured and subsequently executed by Ahmad Gran. Yet his ultimate sacrifice served as a potent catalyst, profoundly galvanizing both the Portuguese expeditionary forces and their Ethiopian allies. In the pivotal year of 1543, during the momentous Battle of Wainadaga, Ahmad Gran met his demise, struck down by a Portuguese musket ball, a blow that precipitated the immediate and total disintegration of his formidable army. The conclusive defeat of Ahmad Gran not only secured the cherished independence of the Ethiopian Empire, but also simultaneously heralded the dawn of a novel and intricately complex relationship with the burgeoning European maritime powers. Having played a pivotal role in preserving Ethiopia's autonomy, the Portuguese naturally harbored expectations of commensurate appreciation and a degree of influence in reciprocal exchange. Their arrival brought not merely military reinforcements, but also a cadre of zealous Jesuit missionaries, whose unwavering objective was to shepherd the venerable Ethiopian Orthodox Church into direct communion with the Roman See. This ambitious endeavor precipitated one of the most tumultuous and religiously charged epochs in Ethiopian history, as successive emperors found themselves ensnared in a precarious balancing act between their profound indebtedness to their Portuguese benefactors and their unwavering fidelity to the deeply entrenched Ethiopian Orthodox theological traditions. Emperor Susenyos, whose reign spanned from 1607 to 1632, made the profoundly consequential choice to embrace Catholicism personally, and subsequently to proclaim it the official state religion of Ethiopia. This was far from being a mere private spiritual inclination. It constituted a veritable political earthquake that reverberated through and fundamentally destabilized the very foundations of Ethiopian society. The emperor's dramatic conversion ignited widespread and fervent rebellion, as Ethiopian nobles, the esteemed clergy, and the common populace alike vehemently repudiated what they perceived as an egregious foreign encroachment upon their ancient and sacred faith. The entire nation plunged into a devastating civil war, a fratricidal conflict where kin fought kin and communities were rent asunder by the bitter divisions born of religious discord. The internal strife escalated to such an extreme that Susenyos, reportedly on his deathbed, conveyed a poignant and profoundly self-aware message to his son and designated heir: "I have utterly ruined the kingdom. It falls to you to restore it." This stands as perhaps the most candid and unvarnished appraisal any monarch has ever rendered regarding the enduring impact of their own reign. His son, Fasilides, absorbed this weighty counsel to heart, and with immediate effect, he systematically dismantled his father's controversial religious edicts. He promptly expelled the Jesuit missionaries from the empire's borders and unequivocally reinstated Ethiopian Orthodox Christianity as the official state religion. The Portuguese, who had once been hailed as indispensable saviors, abruptly found themselves declared persona non grata within the very land they had so recently helped to safeguard. Fasilides's transformative policies extended far beyond the realm of religious restoration. He also meticulously engineered and implemented a sweeping doctrine of isolationism, a strategy that would profoundly shape and define Ethiopia's external relations for the ensuing 2 centuries. Foreign nationals were expressly prohibited from entering the country's borders, and conversely, Ethiopian subjects were strictly forbidden from venturing abroad. It was as though the entire empire had collectively resolved to raise its metaphorical drawbridge and patiently await a time when the wider world might assume a more amenable disposition. This deliberate isolation was not predicated on an inherent xenophobia, but rather on a hard-won sagacity gleaned from the intricate complications invariably accompanying foreign entanglements. The Ethiopians had learned, through bitter experience, that accepting assistance from European powers bore a striking resemblance to inviting a vampire into one's dwelling. Once admitted, dislodging them became an exceedingly formidable undertaking. Concurrently with this era of self-imposed seclusion, Fasilides inaugurated a new imperial capital, establishing it at Gondar, nestled amidst the majestic northern highlands. Gondar was destined to serve as the vibrant heart of the Ethiopian Empire for over 2 centuries, and under the stewardship of Fasilides and his illustrious successors, it burgeoned into one of the African continent's most breathtaking and magnificent urban centers. The emperors of Gondar commissioned the construction of an impressive array of castles and palatial residences, structures that artfully melded indigenous Ethiopian architectural traditions with distinct stylistic influences absorbed during their brief yet impactful encounters with European and Middle Eastern cultures. These iconic edifices, characterized by their distinctive circular towers and crenellated battlements, collectively forged a skyline that was singularly Ethiopian, a harmonious synthesis, neither exclusively African nor purely European, but rather a unique aesthetic unto itself. The Gondarine period, as it is reverently termed by historians, was characterized by a profound efflorescence of Ethiopian culture and intellectual pursuits. The very isolation that rigorously excluded foreign influences simultaneously fostered an environment in which Ethiopian traditions could burgeon and mature unhindered by external interference. Ethiopian artists meticulously refined their distinctive style of religious iconography, producing masterpieces that deftly combined Byzantine artistic conventions with deeply rooted local artistic traditions, resulting in creations that were unmistakably and exquisitely Ethiopian. Ethiopian scholars assiduously compiled and meticulously preserved ancient manuscripts, thereby guaranteeing the enduring survival of their civilization's rich literary heritage for the edification of future generations. Yet, perhaps most significantly, the Gondarine era witnessed the crystallization of what might aptly be described as the quintessential Ethiopian national character, a potent amalgam of profound pride, fierce independence, unwavering religious devotion, and an unyielding resilience against external encroachment, qualities that would prove invaluable in navigating the formidable challenges yet to unfold. During this transformative period, the Ethiopians cultivated a profound adage, roughly rendered as, "Ethiopia stretches her hands unto God," a sentiment that eloquently encapsulated their steadfast conviction that their nation enjoyed divine favor and was divinely ordained to fulfill a unique and pivotal role within God's grand design for the world. The Gondarine emperors were also perpetually confronted with the intricate and persistent challenge of governing a remarkably heterogeneous empire. Ethiopia was never a monolithic entity. Rather, it constituted a complex tapestry woven from diverse peoples, myriad languages, and distinct cultural identities, all painstakingly held together by a potent combination of imperial prerogative, shared religious tenets, and enduring communal traditions. Among the various peoples, the Oromo, who had been migrating steadily into Ethiopian territories since the dawning of the 16th century, presented a particularly nuanced and persistent challenge to imperial cohesion. The Oromo were not merely subjugated populations. Instead, they were a vibrant and dynamic people who gradually assimilated into the broader Ethiopian societal fabric, while steadfastly preserving their unique cultural identity. This intricate process of integration was rarely seamless. It was frequently punctuated by periods of intense conflict and considerable tension. Yet over the passage of time, the Oromo became an indispensable and integral component of Ethiopian civilization, enriching the imperial structure with their distinctive traditions, formidable military prowess, and sophisticated political systems. The advent of the 18th century ushered in a new constellation of formidable challenges for the Ethiopian Empire. The protracted period of deliberate isolation, while undeniably safeguarding Ethiopian independence, had concurrently left the nation somewhat disadvantaged in terms of military technological advancement and the efficiency of its administrative apparatus. More critically, the empire began to experience a profound process of fragmentation, as powerful regional nobles progressively asserted greater autonomy from the centralized imperial government. This tumultuous epoch, historically designated as the Era of the Princes, or Zemene Mesafint, witnessed the effective dissolution of the Ethiopian Empire into a disparate collection of competing principalities. Each of these territories was governed by a potent local magnate who, while nominally acknowledging the authority of the emperor ensconced in Gondar, nonetheless functioned as an independent sovereign within his own dominion. It is important to note that the era of the princes was not unequivocally a dark age in Ethiopian history. Indeed, many regions experienced periods of considerable prosperity under localized governance, and the rich tapestry of Ethiopian culture continued its vibrant flourishing. However, it undeniably signified a profound and debilitating enfeeblement of central imperial authority. The emperor, though maintaining his regal residence within the grand palace at Gondar, was reduced to little more than a symbolic figurehead, wielding no substantive power beyond the immediate confines of the city walls. It was during this very period that the famous and poignant adage emerged, "He reigns but does not rule," a phrase encapsulating the predicament of the powerless emperors who upheld the ceremonial vestiges of imperial authority, while the true levers of power resided firmly in the grasp of formidable regional strongmen. This pervasive fragmentation might conceivably have persisted indefinitely, ultimately leaving Ethiopia fractured into a mere collection of small, independent kingdoms, rather than a unified empire. However, the dawn of the 19th century introduced unprecedented external pressures that would inexorably compel the country to either reunify its disparate parts or face the existential threat of subjugation by foreign colonial powers. The momentous opening of the Suez Canal in 1869 dramatically elevated the strategic importance of the Red Sea region for European imperial ambitions, coinciding with the burgeoning and aggressive scramble for Africa that was commencing in earnest. Ethiopia's neighboring states were systematically succumbing to European control, one after another. Egypt fell under British dominion, Sudan became an Anglo-Egyptian condominium, and the Somali coast was parceled out among various European entities. It became starkly apparent that Ethiopia faced an urgent imperative to modernize and swiftly reunify, lest it risk the complete forfeiture of its cherished independence. The singular figure destined to orchestrate Ethiopia's monumental reunification was Kasa Hailu, a man more widely known to posterity as Emperor Tewodros II. Tewodros was not born into the imperial lineage. He emerged from the ranks of a minor noble family hailing from western Ethiopia. Yet, he possessed that rare confluence of charismatic leadership and profound military acumen that occasionally arises to irrevocably alter the course of history. Through a masterful combination of exceptional military skill, astute political stratagem, and sheer force of an indomitable personality, Tewodros successfully vanquished the various entrenched regional princes and, by the year 1855, had accomplished the formidable task of reunifying Ethiopia under his formidable imperial authority. Emperor Tewodros II was a visionary modernizer who acutely grasped the fundamental truth that Ethiopia was obligated to undergo profound transformation if it aspired to survive and thrive in the rapidly evolving global landscape. He embarked upon ambitious endeavors to establish a professional standing army, meticulously equipped with contemporary weaponry. He also sought to institute far-reaching reforms within the venerable Ethiopian Orthodox Church, aiming to curtail its considerable political influence. Furthermore, he proactively endeavored to forge robust diplomatic relations with European powers, steadfastly insisting on terms of absolute equality. His overarching vision was that of an Ethiopia capable of standing proudly as an undisputed peer among the nations of the world, neither retreating into isolation nor submitting to subordination, but rather engaging dynamically with the wider international community on its own sovereign terms. Regrettably, Emperor Tewodros II's modernization initiatives were profoundly impeded by the very internal divisions he ardently sought to surmount. His sweeping reforms, designed to reshape the ancient Abyssinian state, inevitably jeopardized the deeply entrenched traditional power structures that had governed Ethiopia for centuries, thereby inciting considerable opposition from both the aristocratic nobility and the influential clergy. Furthermore, his earnest endeavors to forge a formidable contemporary military machine necessitated substantial provisions and financial means, resources the fractured empire could scarcely furnish. Moreover, his earnest attempts to cultivate meaningful diplomatic relations with the burgeoning European powers regrettably led to a series of profound misunderstandings that would ultimately prove fatal to his imperial rule. The most notorious of these diplomatic misapprehensions centered upon a significant missive Emperor Tewodros dispatched to Queen Victoria of Great Britain in 1862. This communication explicitly aimed to forge lasting diplomatic relations and earnestly solicited British assistance in modernizing the Ethiopian state. However, when the British government inexplicably neglected to reply to his earnest overture, a failure attributed, apparently, to the letter becoming irretrievably misplaced amidst governmental red tape, an incident perhaps ranking as the most exorbitantly costly instance of lost correspondence in history. Tewodros perceived this oversight as a profound personal affront. As a direct reprisal, he proceeded to detain numerous British subjects, prominently among them the British consul. The subsequent sequence of events unfolded as a veritable tragicomic series of missteps, inexorably escalating into a full-scale military expedition. Confronted by considerable public impetus to secure the liberation of their unjustly detained citizens, the British government resolved to initiate a formidable military expedition to Ethiopia. This undertaking was far from a typical punitive action. Rather, it distinguished itself as one of the most financially exorbitant and operationally intricate endeavors in British military history. The British command meticulously marshaled an impressive contingent, comprising over 13,000 fighting men, augmented by elephants, camels, and an immense logistical train capable of supplying an entire urban center. This formidable force then commenced an arduous inland march from the scorching Red Sea coast, setting a determined course toward Emperor Tewodros's formidable mountain fortress at Magdala. Confronted by this insurmountable military might, Emperor Tewodros found himself progressively isolated. A significant number of his own aristocratic nobles, perceiving the shifting tides of fortune, either deserted his cause or actively collaborated with the advancing British forces. As the formidable British contingent drew nearer to Magdala, Tewodros acutely recognized that his plight was utterly irredeemable. Preferring not to yield and face the profound ignominy of incarceration, he instead elected to dictate the manner of his own demise. Thus, on April 13, 1868, precisely as British forces breached the defenses of his mountain citadel, Tewodros tragically shot himself with a pistol, a weapon originally bestowed upon him as a diplomatic gift by Queen Victoria herself. This act served as a bitter, ultimate paradox in a narrative already replete with tragic misunderstandings. Having successfully accomplished their stated aim of liberating their detained subjects, the British forces subsequently departed the Ethiopian Empire, eschewing any endeavor to establish colonial control. This notable forbearance did not emanate from philanthropic motives, but rather from pragmatic concerns. The entire expedition had proven prohibitively costly, and consequently, the British government lacked any inclination to become mired in the arduous Ethiopian highlands. Nevertheless, as they withdrew, they absconded with an extensive assortment of Ethiopian manuscripts and invaluable artifacts, most notably including Tewodros's imperial crown. These cultural treasures were ultimately deposited in British curatorial institutions, where they persist to this very day, much to the perpetual vexation and unremitting exasperation of successive Ethiopian governments. The tragic demise of Emperor Tewodros II regrettably plunged Ethiopia back into profound disunity. However, his audacious example had undeniably demonstrated that national reunification was indeed possible. The subsequent emperor to undertake this monumental endeavor was Johannes IV, who, by the 1870s, had successfully consolidated his dominion over most of northern and central Ethiopia. Johannes presented a distinct type of sovereign compared to his predecessor. He adopted a more conventional methodology, exhibiting greater amenability to operating within established hierarchies and power structures. Crucially, his primary preoccupation lay in safeguarding Ethiopia against escalating foreign incursions rather than extensive internal modernization. And external threats, indeed, were proliferating. The momentous inauguration of the Suez Canal had transformed the Red Sea basin into a pivotal nexus of European imperial competition, leaving Ethiopia encircled by encroaching imperialistic entities. From the north, the Egyptians, supported by the British Empire, were relentlessly pushing deeper into southern territories from Sudan. Concurrently, the Italians had secured a colonial outpost in Eritrea and were eagerly looking to extend their dominion deeper into the Ethiopian interior. The French, for their part, had gained a strategic toehold in Djibouti, while various other European powers were actively reconnoitering the region, exploring potential avenues for establishing their own lucrative colonial territories. In this perilous geopolitical landscape, Johannes IV proved himself an exceptionally adept martial commander, valiantly repelling numerous incursions and repeated assaults against Ethiopia, He notably vanquished Egyptian contingents at the Battle of Gunday in 1875 and again at Gura in 1876, thereby proving the capability of Ethiopian armies to contend effectively against modern military forces when fighting on their native soil. These pivotal victories held significance not solely in terms of warfare, but also in bolstering national morale. They powerfully underscored the vulnerability of European and Egyptian armies, dispelling the myth of their invincibility, and unequivocally demonstrated that Ethiopian independence could be maintained through determined military resistance. Yet, Emperor Johannes's most formidable adversary emerged from an unforeseen quarter. During the 1880s, a charismatic religious leader named Muhammad Ahmad proclaimed himself the Mahdi, the Guided One, within Sudan, subsequently instigating a widespread revolt against Egyptian rule. The Mahdist movement rapidly accrued significant impetus, and by 1885, Mahdist forces had triumphantly seized control of Khartoum, thereby asserting dominion across most of Sudan. This dramatic development created a novel and menacing contiguous state for Ethiopia, a zealous fundamentalist Islamic polity that inherently regarded the predominantly Christian Ethiopian empire as a natural and implacable antagonist. The ensuing conflict between Ethiopia and the nascent Mahdist state was both a holy war intertwined with a bitter contest for regional geopolitical supremacy. Mahdist forces perpetrated incessant incursions into Ethiopian territory, ruthlessly enslaving populations, seizing valuable livestock, and vigorously propagating their theological doctrines. Consequently, Johannes was compelled to reallocate vital assets and redirect military efforts from other pressing challenges to defend his western borders against these relentless invasions. In 1889, demonstrating exceptional courage, Emperor Johannes IV personally commanded a military force against a significant Mahdist incursion. It was at the pivotal Battle of Metemmah that he tragically fell, perishing in the vanguard of an assault while valiantly leading a charge against enemy positions. The death of Johannes in battle precipitated a fresh dynastic upheaval and another arduous struggle for imperial authority. However, this time, the result would prove distinctly different. The man who ultimately prevailed in the intense competition for the throne was Sahle Mariam, who subsequently adopted the regnal appellation of Menelik II. Menelik, prior to his ascension, had served as the esteemed ruler of the kingdom of Shewa, one of Ethiopia's southern provinces. Consequently, he ascended the imperial seat imbued with a distinct viewpoint and introduced a contrasting array of aims and objectives compared to those of his distinguished predecessors on the Abyssinian throne. Emperor Menelik II would, in time, prove himself to be one of the most pivotal sovereigns in Ethiopian history and arguably throughout the entire African continent. He evinced the spirit of a proponent of modernization, akin to Tewodros, yet he was simultaneously a clear-sighted pragmatist who grasped the imperative of operating judiciously within established frameworks rather than seeking their wholesale dismantling. He was, moreover, a formidable martial commander in the vein of Johannes, but he also possessed the sagacity to recognize the strategic parity of diplomatic engagement with military confrontation in defending Ethiopian independence. Most importantly, he distinguished himself as a masterful architect of unity, who successfully integrated the disparate populations and diverse peoples of Ethiopia into a more integrated and unified imperial entity than had been witnessed for centuries. When Menelik II ascended the imperial throne in 1889, Ethiopia remained a disparate assemblage of largely self-governing territories, bound primarily by individual allegiance and a common spiritual heritage. However, upon his passing in 1913, he had profoundly transformed this loose confederation, forging a contemporary, centrally administered polity complete with clearly demarcated boundaries, a disciplined standing military, and the requisite foundational systems to operate as a cohesive national entity. This monumental transformation was assuredly not an instantaneous metamorphosis, nor was it achieved without considerable strife, yet it stands as one of the most extraordinary feats of national construction in African history. Emperor Menelik's foremost imperative was to finalize the monumental task of reunifying Ethiopia, a process initiated by Tewodros and resolutely continued by Johannes. This ambitious undertaking entailed not only subjugating the disparate regional aristocracies to central imperial authority, but also enlarging the territorial dominion of Ethiopia to include vast regions that had historically remained outside the empire's complete embrace. Consequently, Menelik's formidable armies marched strategically south and east, systematically annexing the domains of the Oromo, Sidama, Walaita, and numerous other peoples into the burgeoning Ethiopian Empire. While this significant expansion was occasionally achieved via diplomatic discourse and strategic pacts, it more frequently necessitated outright martial subjugation and conquest. The territorial expansion under Menelik approximately augmented the geographical extent of the Ethiopian Empire twofold, thereby delineating the geopolitical frontiers that modern Ethiopia substantially retains today. This expansion undoubtedly introduced novel populations, distinct cultural practices, and fresh sources of wealth into the Ethiopian fold. But it simultaneously engendered novel complexities. The recently annexed domains possessed their unique customs, indigenous languages, and distinct ways of organizing society. Amalgamating these heterogeneous territories into a truly unified state therefore required a precarious equilibrium between cultural acceptance and societal absorption, a profound challenge that would test the mettle of future Ethiopian sovereigns for generations to come. Nevertheless, Emperor Menelik's most celebrated accomplishment was undoubtedly his victorious safeguarding of Ethiopian sovereignty against burgeoning Italian imperial aspirations. The Italians, having founded a territorial possession in Eritrea during the 1880s, were eagerly seeking avenues to extend their African empire. They strategically perceived Ethiopia as an opportune objective, viewing it as a comparatively vulnerable African nation ripe for subjugation and incorporation into their colonial possessions. In 1889, they affixed their signatures to the Treaty of Wuchale with Menelik, an accord they were convinced conferred upon them a protectorate status over Ethiopia. Menelik, however, held a distinctly divergent interpretation of the treaty's stipulations. Consequently, when the Italians commenced behaving as though Ethiopia constituted their dependent territory, Menelik unequivocally repudiated the agreement and resolutely braced for armed conflict. The consequent hostilities, historically designated as the initial Italo-Ethiopian conflict, were destined to emerge as a paramount episode in African history. The Italians, profoundly assured by their advanced technological prowess and sophisticated strategic command structure, launched an offensive into Ethiopia in 1895. Their expeditionary force numbered approximately 17,000 combatants, meticulously comprising both metropolitan Italian soldiers and indigenous Eritrean colonial levies. They fully anticipated confronting the characteristic fragmented opposition that European forces had previously encountered across the African continent, and thus they largely foreseen a swift and effortless triumph. What they were instead confronted by, however, was a remarkably cohesive and concerted Ethiopian counteraction that took them entirely by surprise, shattering their preconceived notions of an easy conquest. Emperor Menelik II had dedicated a substantial period to meticulously fortifying his nation against potential foreign incursions. His foresight involved the strategic acquisition of contemporary armaments, the rigorous training of his military forces, and the cultivation of crucial alliances with influential regional potentates across the vast Ethiopian empire. Consequently, upon the commencement of the Italian invasion, he possessed the remarkable capacity to assemble a formidable fighting force exceeding 100,000 soldiers. This truly monumental assembly represented the most extensive indigenous army ever gathered on the African continent. Far from being a mere haphazard collection of disparate tribal combatants, this was a meticulously organized and highly disciplined military entity, outfitted with state-of-the-art rifles and powerful artillery pieces. Furthermore, it was expertly guided by seasoned commanders who possessed a profound mastery of both time-honored Ethiopian military strategies and the evolving principles of modern European-style warfare. The decisive turning point of the protracted conflict unfolded dramatically at the historic Battle of Adwa, which took place on the significant date of March 1st, 1896. The Italian commanding officer, General Oreste Baratieri, had conceived an intricate battle plan, segmenting his expeditionary forces into 3 distinct columns. His intention was to execute a sophisticated flanking maneuver, aiming to envelop the well-entrenched Ethiopian defensive positions. Regrettably for the Italian contingent, a confluence of critical errors undermined their ambitious strategy. Their topographical charts proved woefully imprecise, their intercolumn communications catastrophically failed, and as a direct consequence, their separated formations became dangerously exposed and highly susceptible to concentrated Ethiopian assaults. Emperor Menelik, strategically positioned at the very heart of the Ethiopian battle line, masterfully directed his troops. He skillfully maneuvered his forces to converge against each isolated Italian column sequentially, thereby achieving a localized numerical advantage and overwhelming superiority, even though his overall army was numerically inferior to the combined Italian strength. The immediate aftermath was nothing short of a devastating and catastrophic rout for the Italian imperial forces. The battlefield statistics bore grim witness to their profound losses. In excess of 7,000 Italian and Eritrean askari soldiers met their demise, while many thousands more were apprehended and taken captive. General Baratieri himself narrowly evaded capture, escaping with his life by the slenderest of margins. The triumph achieved by the Ethiopian Empire was so utterly comprehensive and conclusive that it effectively extinguished Italian colonial aspirations within Ethiopia for a subsequent period spanning 4 decades. Crucially, this monumental achievement unequivocally showcased to the global community that indigenous African armies, when appropriately structured, adequately trained, and competently outfitted, possessed the undeniable capacity to overcome formidable European military powers. The ramifications of the Battle of Adwa reverberated far beyond the geographic confines of Ethiopia. It marked an unparalleled historical precedent, representing the first instance since antiquity where an African military force had decisively vanquished a European colonial power, thereby sending profound shockwaves throughout both the African continent and the European metropolises. For the peoples of Africa, this victory served as irrefutable evidence that perceived European military invincibility was not an absolute truth, consequently igniting and bolstering numerous resistance movements across the entire continent. Conversely, for the European powers, it compelled an inescapable acknowledgement that Africa harbored complex and sophisticated societies, fully capable of valiantly defending their sovereignty against the encroaching tide of colonial subjugation. The resounding triumph at Adwa cemented Ethiopia's distinctive status as the sole African nation, alongside the Republic of Liberia, to successfully preserve its cherished independence amidst the voracious territorial appropriations of the scramble for Africa. This hard-won sovereignty was far from a mere symbolic gesture. Rather, it bore profound and tangible implications that would fundamentally mold Ethiopia's trajectory of development for many ensuing decades. In stark contrast to the fate of countless other African societies, which found their established structures and ways of life profoundly disrupted and reordered by the imposition of colonial governance, Ethiopia was uniquely positioned to pursue its own developmental path, guided by its inherent priorities and time-honored traditions. Furthermore, while the economies of other African territories were systematically reconfigured to exclusively cater to the extractive demands and commercial imperatives of their colonial masters, Ethiopia steadfastly retained sovereign authority over its vital natural resources and maintained autonomous control over its crucial international trade relationships. Seizing the invaluable respite and strategic advantage afforded by his monumental victory at Adwa, Emperor Menelik II vigorously recommenced and intensified his ambitious modernization initiatives. His visionary leadership saw the establishment of Ethiopia's inaugural modern educational institutions, the construction of the nation's pioneering hospitals, and the commencement of an ambitious railway project designed to connect the distant coastline with the burgeoning capital. Concurrently, he orchestrated the relocation of the imperial capital from the venerable city of Gondar to Addis Ababa, a vibrant new metropolis that he personally founded amidst the picturesque central highlands. So, the very appellation Addis Ababa, translating to new flower in the Amharic language, was intentionally chosen to embody the spirit of rejuvenation and progressive modernization that he envisioned for the entire Ethiopian empire. The selection of this particular geographical site for the new capital was undeniably strategic. Addis Ababa occupied a pivotal, centrally located position within the considerably expanded empire, a feature that significantly facilitated the effective governance and unified administration of the diverse and extensive territories that Menelik had successfully brought under Ethiopian dominion. The strategic establishment of Addis Ababa as the Ethiopian Empire's new seat of power transcended a mere administrative directive. It served as a profound declaration regarding the progressive national identity Menelik envisioned for his beloved Ethiopia. In stark juxtaposition to Gondar, a city deeply steeped in its rich medieval heritage and characterized by its venerable ancient palaces, Addis Ababa was meticulously conceived and constructed from its very foundations as a forward-looking, contemporary, urban center. Its design incorporated expansive boulevards, expressly suited for the advent of automobiles, showcased innovative modern edifices erected with carefully sourced imported construction materials, and boasted an advanced infrastructural network specifically engineered to sustain a burgeoning population and accommodate a rapidly expanding national economy. Emperor Menelik possessed a profound comprehension that genuine modernization necessitated more than merely the erection of novel architectural structures and the adoption of advanced technological devices. It intrinsically demanded the cultivation of innovative concepts and the embrace of progressive cognitive frameworks. To this end, he proactively dispatched promising Ethiopian scholars to pursue higher education in prestigious European universities, thereby facilitating the repatriation of cutting-edge knowledge in fields such as modern science, advanced medical practices, and efficient public administration. Furthermore, he extended invitations to skilled foreign consultants, enlisting their expertise in the establishment of contemporary national institutions. However, in a significant departure from the practices of his imperial forebears, Menelik meticulously ensured that Ethiopian sovereignty and control were rigorously upheld within these crucial international relationships. The foreign experts who arrived in Ethiopia during his reign were unequivocally engaged in the capacity of salaried employees and trusted advisors, distinctly not as encroaching colonial administrators or proselytizing missionaries intent on fundamentally reshaping Ethiopian societal norms. Among Emperor Menelik's most pivotal and far-reaching innovations was the strategic establishment of a sophisticated modern postal service and an extensive telegraphic communications network. While such an endeavor might, at first glance, appear to be a comparatively minor administrative adjustment, within the expansive and ethnically diverse territorial expanse of Ethiopia, robust and efficient communication infrastructure proved absolutely indispensable for preserving national cohesion and maintaining effective central governance. The newfound capacity to transmit messages with unprecedented speed across the vast empire empowered Menelik to meticulously coordinate intricate military operations, swiftly address localized crises as they emerged, and consistently sustain vital contact with his regionally appointed governors. Furthermore, this system significantly bolstered internal trade and external commerce, enabling merchants to synchronize their ventures and transactions across immense geographical distances. Crucially, the telegraphic apparatus simultaneously forged a direct link between Ethiopia and the broader global community, a connection that had been utterly unattainable during the preceding era of national isolation. Consequently, Ethiopian diplomatic representatives could now engage in direct communication with their counterparts in foreign nations, thereby streamlining diplomatic engagements and accelerating the negotiation of international trade accords. Global news and pertinent information could now reach the imperial capital of Addis Ababa within a matter of days, a stark contrast to the months it previously took, ensuring that Ethiopian leadership remained thoroughly appraised of international developments that held potential implications for their sovereign nation. Nevertheless, it is arguably Menelik's most enduring and transformative contribution to the progressive development of Ethiopia that lies in his pioneering establishment of a comprehensive modern educational framework. Prior to his reforms, the traditional Ethiopian scholastic system had been predominantly overseen by the Venerable Orthodox Church, which, while offering exemplary instruction in theological and religious disciplines, provided only restricted exposure to contemporary scientific principles and technological advancements. In a bold departure, Menelik instituted secular educational institutions where subjects such as mathematics, natural sciences, geography, and modern foreign languages were taught alongside the customary curriculum. Additionally, he sponsored exceptionally gifted students to pursue advanced studies in foreign universities, thereby cultivating a nascent corps of highly educated Ethiopian intellectuals poised to significantly contribute to the nation's ongoing modernization. The genesis of these modern schools extended beyond the mere impartation of practical proficiencies. It was fundamentally geared towards forging a distinctive and forward-looking Ethiopian national identity. Scholars within Menelik's innovative academies delved deeply into Ethiopian history and cultural heritage. Yet they were simultaneously introduced to the broader global landscape and Ethiopia's unique position within it. They engaged with the study of historical great civilizations and the contemporary nations of their era, meticulously fostering a profound sense of national pride in Ethiopia's rich accomplishments, while concurrently developing a nuanced understanding of the complex challenges and emergent opportunities presented by the modern globalized world. The epoch of Emperor Menelik's rule was also characterized by a period of considerable and sustained economic advancement. The sagacious emperor actively championed the emergence of nascent industries, vigorously promoted the expansion of both domestic and international trade networks, and spearheaded initiatives aimed at enhancing traditional agricultural methodologies. He was responsible for inaugurating Ethiopia's pioneering modern banking institutions, a crucial step that significantly streamlined commercial transactions and stimulated vital investment. Furthermore, Menelik initiated extensive construction projects for new roads and bridges, thereby substantially improving internal transportation routes and inter-regional communication across the expansive empire. The renowned railway line stretching from the port city of Djibouti to the imperial capital of Addis Ababa, a monumental undertaking commenced during Menelik's tenure, stood as a particular emblem of national pride. This ambitious infrastructure project represented one of the most formidable engineering feats ever attempted on the African continent, and its completion dramatically curtailed both the transit time and the financial expenditure associated with conveying merchandise between the elevated Ethiopian highlands and the coastal maritime routes. Nonetheless, this ambitious railway undertaking was by no means devoid of its attendant controversies and considerable complexities. Its construction was notably underwritten by French financial investors and executed by skilled French engineering teams, a circumstance that inevitably engendered apprehension regarding the potential for undue foreign influence in Ethiopia's sovereign internal affairs. Beyond these geopolitical concerns, the project was also beset by formidable technical obstacles. The railway track was compelled to traverse exceptionally challenging topographical features, including perilous deep gorges and arduous high mountain passes. Consequently, the construction process proved both protracted and remarkably costly, frequently punctuated by acrimonious disagreements between the Ethiopian imperial government, the French operating company, and a diverse array of international creditors. Indeed, at one critical juncture, the entire enterprise teetered on the brink of complete abandonment, perilously close to collapsing entirely due to overwhelming financial exigencies. Nevertheless, Emperor Menelik resolutely persisted with the ambitious railway project, driven by his profound grasp of its overarching strategic significance. The completed railway line was poised to furnish Ethiopia with dependable and direct access to the sea. thereby substantially diminishing the nation's reliance on potentially adversarial neighboring states for crucial trade routes. Beyond its commercial utility, it was also designed to significantly streamline the logistical movement of imperial troops and vital provisions, consequently bolstering the central government's capacity to effectively assert and maintain control over its geographically distant provinces. Most profoundly, this monumental undertaking would unequivocally signal to the global community that Ethiopia stood as a truly modern nation, fully capable of conceiving and executing large-scale, intricate infrastructure endeavors. The ultimate completion of the railway line extending to Addis Ababa in 1917, a mere 4 years following Emperor Menelik's passing, served as a powerful symbolic demarcation. The definitive conclusion of Ethiopia's prolonged period of relative isolation and the auspicious commencement of its full and active participation in the modern global arena. Ethiopian commodities could now access international markets with unprecedented speed and efficiency, while conversely, foreign goods and innovative concepts could flow into Ethiopia more readily than at any previous juncture. The majestic railway station in Addis Ababa subsequently emerged as an iconic emblem of Ethiopian modernity and progressive advancement, a tangible and undeniable testament that this ancient African empire possessed the inherent resilience to adapt, evolve, and flourish within the dynamic landscape of the 20th century. However, Emperor Menelik's ambitious endeavors to modernize his ancient realm were not universally embraced, encountering a spectrum of detractors and formidable obstacles. A significant cadre of traditional nobles harbored deep anxieties that the imperial drive toward centralization would inevitably erode their inherited influence and autonomy over their ancestral domains, threatening their long-established feudal privileges and local governance. Concurrently, influential religious leaders within the Ethiopian Orthodox Church expressed profound apprehension that the propagation of secular education and the influx of foreign cultural paradigms would inexorably undermine the deeply entrenched spiritual tenets and time-honored practices of their faith. Furthermore, diverse regional populations, who had been forcibly incorporated into the expanding empire through military subjugation, frequently harbored resentment towards the imposition of central imperial authority and the pervasive spread of Amharic language and customs. Navigating these multifaceted and often volatile tensions demanded the full breadth of Menelik's exceptional political acumen and diplomatic dexterity. Among the most pressing quandaries that confronted Emperor Menelik was the intricate issue of imperial succession. The venerable monarch found himself without any surviving male progeny, and the ancient Ethiopian dynastic traditions offered an ambiguous and often contradictory framework regarding the legitimacy of female heirs ascending to the throne. This inherent uncertainty cast a long shadow over the future trajectory of the Solomonic dynasty and raised serious questions about the continuity and ultimate fate of Menelik's progressive modernization agenda. Ultimately, the emperor designated his grandson, Lij Iyasu, as his chosen successor, a decision that would regrettably prove to be fraught with profound complications. Iyasu, who assumed the reins of power in 1913 following Menelik's demise, was a youthful sovereign whose philosophical outlook and policy inclinations diverged significantly from those of his sagacious grandfather. Whereas Menelik had adopted a judiciously cautious approach to foreign influences while pragmatically embracing technological and administrative advancements, Iyasu appeared considerably more inclined to experiment with radical societal transformations. Most controversially, he began to conspicuously display a marked sympathy for Islam and actively cultivated strategic relationships with prominent Muslim leaders, both within the diverse territories of Ethiopia and in neighboring Islamic states. This perceived departure from the nation's foundational Christian heritage was widely interpreted as a profound betrayal of Ethiopian Orthodox traditions, generating widespread alarm and fervent opposition among the powerful nobility and the entrenched clergy. The already intricate political landscape was further exacerbated by the cataclysmic eruption of World War I, a global conflict that simultaneously presented Ethiopia with unprecedented pressures and tantalizing opportunities. The internecine struggle between the dominant European colonial powers theoretically opened avenues for Ethiopia to potentially expand its geopolitical influence, or even reclaim territories that had been unjustly annexed during the preceding scramble for Africa. However, this volatile international climate also harbored immense perils. An ill-considered alignment in the sprawling conflict could precipitate catastrophic consequences for Ethiopia's hard-won independence and sovereignty. Iyasu's conspicuous affinity for the Ottoman Empire and the Central Powers, when combined with his contentious domestic religious policies, plunged his leadership into a profound crisis of confidence. Consequently, in 1916, a powerful coalition comprising influential nobles, high-ranking clergy, and key military commanders orchestrated a decisive coup, deposing the young emperor. They subsequently installed Menelik's daughter, Empress Zuditu, as the new empress regnant. This represented a truly remarkable historical precedent. Ethiopia emerged as one of the pioneering nations globally to embrace a female head of state in the contemporary era. Nevertheless, the substantive exercise of imperial authority was predominantly wielded by the appointed regent, Ras Tafari Makonnen, a figure destined to later ascend the imperial throne as Emperor Haile Selassie I. The regency of Ras Tafari heralded the dawn of a distinctive new epoch in Ethiopian history. Tafari, much like his illustrious predecessor Menelik II, was an ardent proponent of modernization, yet he distinguished himself through a far more pronounced internationalist perspective and an enhanced willingness to actively engage with the broader global community. He possessed a prescient understanding that Ethiopia's enduring independence would necessitate not merely robust military strength, but also an astute command of diplomatic strategy and widespread international recognition. Consequently, he embarked upon a concerted mission to firmly establish Ethiopia as a respected and integral member of the international community, vigorously pursuing membership in nascent international organizations and assiduously cultivating strategic relationships with the world's preeminent powers. Among Tafari's earliest and most pivotal diplomatic achievements was the successful securing of Ethiopia's admission to the prestigious League of Nations in 1923. This monumental accomplishment marked a significant milestone, as Ethiopia proudly became the first African nation to join the League, its membership serving as an unequivocal affirmation of its standing as a truly sovereign and independent nation-state. This admission, however, was not devoid of considerable contention. Some entrenched European member states voiced skepticism, questioning whether an African country could genuinely be considered sufficiently civilized by prevailing Western standards to merit such inclusion. Yet Tafari's exceptional diplomatic finesse and Ethiopia's demonstrable capacity for effective self-governance ultimately prevailed over these prejudiced objections. Ethiopia's membership in the League of Nations transcended mere symbolic importance. It furnished the nation with an invaluable platform for sophisticated international diplomacy and represented a crucial potential source of collective support in the event of external aggressions. Tafari acutely perceived that in an increasingly interconnected global landscape, a policy of isolation was no longer a viable strategy for safeguarding national independence. Ethiopia, he understood, was compelled to integrate itself within the international system if it was to effectively shield itself against future geopolitical challenges. Beyond his diplomatic endeavors, Tafari diligently perpetuated Menelik's modernization initiatives, albeit with an even greater emphasis on active international engagement. He embarked on extensive global travels, thereby becoming the first Ethiopian ruler to undertake official visits to European capitals and various other parts of the world. These journeys were not exclusively confined to diplomatic missions. They served as invaluable learning expeditions. Tafari meticulously studied modern governmental institutions, cutting-edge technologies, and advanced administrative practices, diligently gathering innovative ideas that could be judiciously adapted to Ethiopia's unique domestic circumstances. The regent's travels also fulfilled a vital public relations function. By presenting himself in international forums as an articulate, highly educated, and sophisticated leader, Tafari directly challenged pervasive European stereotypes concerning African rulers. He powerfully demonstrated that Ethiopia was, in essence, a modern nation deserving of profound respect and unqualified recognition on the world stage. His frequent appearances at influential international conferences and his direct engagements with global leaders significantly contributed to solidifying Ethiopia's burgeoning reputation as a meaningful and respected player in international affairs. In the year 1930, following the demise of Empress Zewditu, Ras Tafari was ceremoniously crowned as Emperor Haile Selassie I. The coronation itself was a truly spectacular and meticulously orchestrated affair that captivated international attention and served as a magnificent showcase of Ethiopia's inherent wealth, sophisticated culture, and profound historical richness. Dignitaries and representatives from across the globe converged to witness the elaborate ceremony, which was conducted in strict adherence to ancient Ethiopian traditions, yet seamlessly incorporated modern elements that unmistakably reflected the nation's active engagement with the contemporary world. The imperial name, Haile Selassie, meaning power of the Trinity, profoundly reflected the new emperor's deep personal religious faith and his inherent understanding of his sacred role as the steadfast defender of Ethiopian Orthodox Christianity. Nevertheless, Haile Selassie was simultaneously a forward-thinking modernizer who possessed a clear vision that deeply cherished tradition and progressive advancement could harmoniously coexist. His coronation ceremony, therefore, skillfully interwoven ancient rituals that symbolically connected him to the lengthy and venerable lineage of Ethiopian emperors with contemporary elements that unequivocally demonstrated Ethiopia's rightful and prominent place in the modern global community. Haile Selassie's nascent years as emperor were notably characterized by sustained and vigorous efforts in both national modernization and enhanced international engagement. In 1931, he promulgated Ethiopia's inaugural written constitution, meticulously crafting a foundational framework for modern governance, while scrupulously preserving the essential characteristics of the enduring imperial system. This carefully devised constitution, established a nascent parliament, delineated fundamental rights for all citizens, and laid the groundwork for a modern legal system. Yet it concurrently maintained the emperor's pivotal and central role within the intricate tapestry of Ethiopian governance. The new constitution thus represented a delicate and astute balance between the preservation of cherished tradition and the imperative of modern progress. It formally recognized the emperor as the supreme authority throughout Ethiopia, thereby upholding the traditional bedrock of Ethiopian government. But it simultaneously introduced institutions and procedures that reflected contemporary principles of enlightened governance. The parliament, while initially circumscribed in its legislative powers, provided an essential forum for the deliberation of critical national issues and served as a valuable mechanism for incorporating diverse regional voices into the broader political discourse. Haile Selassie also assiduously continued the expansion of modern education, actively establishing numerous new schools and dispatching an increasing number of students to schools' number of promising students abroad for advanced academic and technical training. He possessed a profound understanding that Ethiopia's long-term national development and sustained prosperity would ultimately hinge upon cultivating an educated populace, capable of expertly managing modern institutions and adeptly mastering complex technologies. The emperor himself was a fervent advocate for educational advancement, frequently visiting schools and personally encouraging students to pursue their studies with diligent dedication. However, the most formidable challenge of Haile Selassie's early reign emerged from an unexpected and deeply troubling source: the resurgence of Italian colonial ambitions. Benito Mussolini, who had ascended to power in Italy in 1922, was consumed by a fervent determination to restore Italy's diminished national prestige and forge a new Roman Empire. The humiliating defeat suffered at Adwa in 1896 still festered as a painful scar in the collective Italian memory, and Mussolini envisioned the conquest of Ethiopia as a definitive means to avenge that ignominious setback and unequivocally demonstrate Italian military prowess on the world stage. The meticulous Italian preparations for a renewed invasion of Ethiopia commenced in the early 1930s. Mussolini systematically augmented Italian military forces stationed in Eritrea and Italian Somaliland, the two colonial territories that shared extensive borders with Ethiopia, and initiated the massive stockpiling of weaponry and logistical supplies for what was clearly intended to be a major military campaign. Simultaneously, the Italians launched an extensive propaganda campaign, meticulously designed to justify their impending invasion, disingenuously portraying Ethiopia as a barbaric and uncivilized nation that purportedly required European control for its own supposed betterment and advancement. Emperor Haile Selassie was acutely cognizant of the escalating Italian preparations and exerted every conceivable effort to ready Ethiopia for the inevitable conflict. He diligently endeavored to modernize the antiquated Ethiopian military, importing desperately needed weaponry and providing officers with rigorous training in contemporary military techniques. He also strenuously sought international solidarity and support, appealing passionately to the League of Nations and other influential world powers to intervene and help defend Ethiopia's cherished independence. Regrettably, the international response was, at best, tepid and largely ineffectual. Most European powers were overwhelmingly preoccupied with the burgeoning and more immediate threat posed by Nazi Germany's aggressive expansionism than with Italian colonial aspirations in distant Africa. The Second Italo-Ethiopian War erupted in October 1935 when formidable Italian forces launched a full-scale invasion of Ethiopia from both Eritrea in the north and Italian Somaliland in the southeast. On this occasion, the Italians were vastly better prepared and equipped than they had been during their ill-fated campaign in 1896. They fielded a considerably larger army, possessed superior military equipment, and implemented more sophisticated logistical strategies. Crucially, they commanded overwhelming air power. Italian aircraft were deployed to devastating effect, bombing Ethiopian positions and disrupting vital supply lines, thereby affording the invading forces a decisive and often brutal advantage over the defending Ethiopian armies. The Ethiopian counter-response was severely hampered by several critical factors that had not been present during the first Italian invasion. The country was less cohesively unified than it had been under the resolute leadership of Menelik II, with some regional leaders maintaining a precarious neutrality, or, in some unfortunate instances, actively collaborating with the Italian invaders. The Ethiopian military, while numerically larger than in 1896, remained largely unmodernized and critically lacked the aerial capabilities, heavy artillery, and other advanced weaponry, including chemical weapons, that the Italians possessed in abundance. Most critically, Ethiopia found itself fighting in almost complete isolation, unlike in 1896, when the nation had been able to freely procure weapons from international markets. The League of Nations, in a controversial decision, had imposed an arms embargo that disproportionately and devastatingly impacted Ethiopia far more severely than it did Italy. Despite these inherent handicaps, Ethiopian forces mounted a tenacious opposition to the Italian invasion. The rugged, mountainous topography of Ethiopia offered a strategic advantage to the defenders, and Ethiopian soldiers exhibited the same unwavering bravery and resolute spirit that had secured their historic triumph at Adwa. For a period spanning several months, the ultimate resolution of the conflict remained uncertain, with Ethiopian contingents achieving some remarkable successes against the advancing Italian columns. Nevertheless, the Italian military's deployment of poison gas, a flagrant disregard for global statutes, began to decisively alter the trajectory of the war. Italian aircraft indiscriminately discharged mustard gas upon Ethiopian positions, inflicting ghastly fatalities and devastating injuries, thereby profoundly eroding the morale of the Ethiopian forces. This insidious use of chemical weaponry proved supremely efficacious against Ethiopian cavalry and traditional warriors, who were utterly exposed due to their complete lack of defensive equipment. International protests, though vocal against the use of these toxic agents, were largely futile, and the Italians persisted in employing these weapons throughout the entire campaign. By the nascent stages of 1936, it grew unmistakably apparent that Ethiopian resistance was rapidly disintegrating. Italian legions were pushing forward simultaneously across multiple battlegrounds, systematically dismantling Ethiopian armies piecemeal. In May of that year, Italian forces made their entry into Addis Ababa, and Benito Mussolini, with triumphal pronouncements, declared the formation of Italian East Africa, amalgamating Ethiopia with Eritrea and Italian Somaliland into a singular colonial dominion. Haile Selassie, confronted with the complete collapse of organized opposition, made the arduous choice to seek refuge in exile rather than prolong a futile endeavor. On May 2, 1936, he departed Ethiopia, eventually making his way to Great Britain, where he would dedicate the subsequent 5 years to laboring for the restoration of Ethiopian independence. His departure, however, proved contentious. Some Ethiopians felt that the emperor ought to have remained within the country to lead a protracted struggle. Yet, Haile Selassie possessed the foresight to understand that his presence outside Ethiopia might be of greater utility than his capture or demise within the nation's borders. The emperor's address before the League of Nations in Geneva in June 1936 became one of the most indelible instances in the organization's checkered history. Speaking eloquently in Amharic, with his profound words simultaneously translated into French and English, Haile Selassie delivered a fervent appeal for global intervention to reinstate Ethiopian sovereignty. His powerful speech was persistently heckled and frequently disrupted by Italian journalists and fascist sympathizers. Yet the emperor preserved his composure and continued his dignified call for equity. I, Haile Selassie, Emperor of Ethiopia, am here today to claim that justice which is due to my people and the assistance promised to it 8 months ago, when 50 nations asserted that aggression had been committed in violation of international treaties, the emperor declared, his voice resonating with conviction. His declarations echoed globally, and his stately demeanor in the face of such blatant fascist harassment transformed him into an emblem of defiance against aggression and an ardent advocate for universal principles of international law. Nevertheless, the League of Nations, despite its lofty pronouncements about collective security and global statutes, demonstrated an undeniable incapacity or reluctance to undertake effective measures to restore Ethiopian independence. Economic sanctions levied against Italy were tepid and ultimately inconsequential, lacking both vigor and practical impact, and no armed intervention was ever initiated to annul the Italian occupation. The League of Nations' profound dereliction in safeguarding Ethiopia stood as one of the pivotal factors that contributed to its ultimate dissolution and its eventual supersession by the United Nations following the conclusion of World War II. Meanwhile, within Ethiopia itself, the Italian administration proved to be oppressively severe and ruthlessly rapacious. The Italians endeavored to refashion Ethiopia into an archetypal imperial possession, systematically plundering its natural endowments for the exclusive advantage of the metropolitan power and superimposing Occidental societal and governmental frameworks upon the Ethiopian populace. They did construct roads and other foundational infrastructure, but primarily to expedite the extraction of Ethiopian wealth rather than to genuinely benefit the local inhabitants. Italian colonial rule also explicitly sought to dismantle Ethiopian cultural and political institutions. The Italians prohibited the application of Amharic in educational establishments and governmental functions, championed Italian language and culture, and actively attempted to subvert the venerable Ethiopian Orthodox Church. Furthermore, they instituted discriminatory statutes strikingly similar to those enforced in Nazi Germany, creating a rigid caste system that placed Italians at the apex, individuals of mixed heritage in the intermediate strata, and indigenous Ethiopians at the very bottom. Nevertheless, Italian dominion in Ethiopia remained perpetually incomplete and was never entirely cemented. Resistance persisted without cessation throughout the entire period of occupation, with Ethiopian nationalist insurgents engaging in irregular combat against Italian forces and their local collaborators. This indigenous opposition proved especially robust in the country's rugged mountainous regions, where traditional Ethiopian military tactics were supremely efficacious against the more orthodox military units of the occupiers. This formidable resistance was spearheaded by a diverse array of personalities, including traditional nobles who had stayed steadfast in their allegiance to Haile Selassie, religious leaders who vehemently contested Italian efforts to undermine the Ethiopian Orthodox faith, and local commanders who skillfully mobilized their communities for a protracted conflict against the foreign occupiers. One of the most renowned insurgent leaders was Ababa Aragai, who masterfully organized guerrilla operations within the Shewa region, and subsequently became revered as the Lion of Judah's defender. Another prominent figure was Balasafo, an elderly general who had served under Emperor Menelik II and steadfastly refused to accept Italian rule despite his advanced age and the overwhelming odds. The nature of this resistance transcended mere armed conflict. It was also intrinsically cultural and deeply spiritual. Ethiopian priests persevered in performing sacred rites in clandestine venues, diligently safeguarding religious traditions that the Italians were endeavoring to stifle. Ethiopian teachers clandestinely instructed children in Amharic, upholding the linguistic heritage and literary canon that were foundational to the Ethiopian ethos. Ethiopian artists and musicians created evocative works that extolled Ethiopian history and culture, often while artfully lampooning Italian presumptions with subtle yet potent satire. The Italian occupation also contended with significant logistical hurdles that severely impeded genuine governance. Ethiopia was an expansive nation characterized by arduous topography and deficient connectivity, making it exceedingly challenging for Italian forces to assert authority across distant and isolated locales. The Italian colonial administration was notoriously deficient in personnel and resources, relying extensively on local collaborators who were frequently untrustworthy and fickle. Most importantly, the Italians consistently failed to secure popular allegiance, proving utterly incapable of gaining the hearts and minds of the Ethiopian people, who continued to view them unequivocally as alien aggressors rather than legitimate rulers. The geopolitical situation underwent a profound transformation with the commencement of the global conflict known as World War II in 1939. Initially, Italy's entry into the war on the side of Nazi Germany appeared to bolster the Italian standing in the Horn of Africa, as it afforded Mussolini's forces the occasion to launch offensives against British territories in Sudan and Kenya. Italian forces garnered some initial victories, seizing British Somaliland and pushing into Sudan and Kenya with early successes. However, the British response proved to be remarkably rapid and resolutely definitive. Apprehending the crucial geopolitical significance of the Red Sea region and the distinct peril that the Italian colonial entity presented to vital British communications with India and the Far East, the British mustered a considerable contingent to reclaim the territory. More crucially for Ethiopia, the British affirmed Haile Selassie's rightful sovereignty as the legitimate ruler of Ethiopia and pledged assistance for his reinstatement to the throne. In January 1941, Haile Selassie re-entered his homeland as an integral part of a British military expedition specifically aimed at liberating the country from Italian rule. The emperor's return was both profoundly emblematic and functionally tangible. It provided an essential focal point for Ethiopian resistance and unequivocally evinced British dedication to restoring Ethiopian independence. The inspiring sight of their emperor back on Ethiopian soil after 5 years of arduous exile invigorated Ethiopian nationalists and swiftly led to a massive, widespread insurrection against Italian rule. The liberation campaign itself was exceptionally rapid and triumphantly successful. British and Commonwealth forces, bolstered by Ethiopian patriots and Free French troops deployed from Djibouti, progressed simultaneously across multiple sectors against Italian positions. The Italians, completely isolated from fresh troops and confronted by antagonistic inhabitants throughout their territory, were utterly incapable of offering meaningful opposition. By April 1941, British forces had seized Addis Ababa, and Italian resistance in Ethiopia had predominantly disintegrated. On May 5, 1941, precisely 5 years to the day after his departure from the country, Haile Selassie made a victorious entry into Addis Ababa. This date was meticulously selected. It marked the anniversary of the Italian seizure of the capital, and the emperor's return on this specific date epitomized the total undoing of the Italian conquest. Throngs filled the thoroughfares to welcome their returning emperor, and the jubilant celebration persisted for multiple sunrises. The restoration of Ethiopian independence transcended mere martial triumph. It represented a profound vindication of the tenets of international law and collective security that had been so severely compromised by the League of Nations dereliction in safeguarding Ethiopia during 1935–36. Ethiopia earned the distinction of becoming the inaugural nation conquered by the Axis bloc to achieve full emancipation, and Haile Selassie emerged as an enduring emblem of defiance against fascist aggression. Nevertheless, the liberation of Ethiopia also engendered a fresh array of difficulties and intricacies. The country had been ravaged by half a decade of relentless conflict and subjugation, with much of its foundational infrastructure obliterated and its economy profoundly dislocated. The Italian colonial administration had bequeathed a complex inheritance of roads and buildings, yet also a legacy of pervasive societal disarray and significant cultural attrition. Most importantly, the harrowing experience of occupation and the subsequent resistance had fundamentally transformed the Ethiopian social fabric in ways that would have protracted consequences. The war had also significantly bolstered the standing of regional chieftains and insurgent officers who had valiantly fought against the Italians. These men had acquired considerable martial expertise, accrued substantial governmental leverage, and cultivated widespread public approbation during the occupation, and they naturally anticipated recompense for their loyalty and service. Navigating these expectations while simultaneously re-establishing paramount national governance would prove to be one of Haile Selassie's most formidable obstacles in the ensuing post-war period. The emperor found himself compelled to contend with the profoundly altered international environment forged in the aftermath of World War II. The venerable European colonial empires were beginning their inexorable decline, while new global titans, specifically the United States and the Soviet Union, were ascendant, poised to exert a dominant influence over world affairs. Ethiopia, a nation striving for progress and autonomy, thus faced the intricate task of maneuvering through this reconfigured geopolitical landscape, all the while safeguarding its cherished independence and ardently pursuing its national development objectives. Haile Selassie, in this complex post-war epoch, demonstrated an exceptionally skillful command of international diplomacy. He strategically cultivated alliances with the Western powers, yet simultaneously maintained amicable ties with the Soviet Union and other communist nations, exhibiting a pragmatic approach to foreign relations. As a pivotal architect of the United Nations in 1945, He ensured Ethiopia's active and vigorous participation in a multitude of international organizations and significant global conferences. The sagacious emperor keenly understood that within this nascent world order, smaller countries needed to forge collective solidarity to effectively protect their sovereign concerns against the overbearing influence of the burgeoning superpowers. Among Haile Selassie's most seminal global endeavors was his instrumental role in the establishment of the Organization of African Unity, OAU, in 1963. The emperor had long been a staunch proponent of African unity and the continent's self-determination, perceiving the OAU as a crucial mechanism to further these objectives, while simultaneously bolstering Ethiopia's influence in Pan-African affairs. The decision to designate Addis Ababa as the permanent headquarters for the OAU served as a profound recognition of Ethiopia's distinctive historical status. It was, alongside Liberia, the sole African nation that had successfully preserved its sovereignty throughout the entire colonial period, a testament to its enduring resilience. The emperor's momentous address to the United Nations General Assembly in 1963 stands as one of the most unforgettable pronouncements in the organization's annals. He famously declared, with profound conviction, "Until the philosophy which holds one race superior and another inferior is finally and permanently discredited and abandoned, everywhere is war," his potent words echoing profoundly beyond the confines of the UN building in New York and resonating across the globe. This inspiring speech would later catalyze Bob Marley's iconic song, War, thereby disseminating Haile Selassie's powerful message to an international public and solidifying his reputation as an enduring emblem of defiance against tyranny and disparity. However, even as Haile Selassie garnered global recognition as a preeminent statesman and a fervent advocate for African independence, the internal situation within Ethiopia grew progressively more intricate. The emperor's ambitious modernization efforts, which had been abruptly interrupted by the Italian occupation, recommenced with heightened intensity following the nation's liberation. A flurry of construction saw new schools inaugurated, hospitals instituted, and critical infrastructure projects initiated across the country. The emperor also embarked upon the enactment of agrarian restructuring and governmental reconfigurations, all meticulously designed to update Ethiopian society and its administrative framework. Nevertheless, these sweeping reforms inherently engendered friction within the diverse strata of Ethiopian society. Traditional nobles harbored anxieties that modernization would inexorably erode their inherited authority and long-held privileges. Regional leaders, who had accumulated significant sway during the resistance period, chafed at efforts to reinstate centralized governance. Meanwhile, a burgeoning class of younger, educated Ethiopians grew increasingly discontented with the slow tempo of change, leading them to question whether the imperial system was truly equipped to effectuate the rapid development that the country so urgently required. The 1960 coup attempt marked a pivotal moment in Haile Selassie's reign and, more broadly, in the trajectory of Ethiopian history. While the emperor was engaged in an official diplomatic engagement in Brazil, a clandestine group comprising military officers and intellectuals, spearheaded by the commander of the Imperial Guard, made a concerted effort to subvert the government. Their aim was to unseat the existing administration and establish the emperor's son, Crown Prince Asfaw Wasson, as a constitutional monarch. The coup leaders publicly articulated their objective to accelerate Ethiopia's modernization and to curtail the influence of the traditional elites. The attempted coup was ultimately quelled following a 4-day struggle in Addis Ababa, but its very occurrence unmasked the profound extent of dissatisfaction with the pace of reform and underscored the increasing sway of educated, modernizing elements within Ethiopian society. The emperor's subsequent response was typically judicious. He granted clemency to the majority of the coup participants, and in a surprising move, even expedited certain of his reform programs. Yet this unsettling incident also rendered him more circumspect regarding political change and fostered a deeper wariness of potential challenges to his supreme authority. The period spanning the 1960s and early 1970s witnessed sustained socio-economic advancement across Ethiopia, yet it was concurrently characterized by escalating political discord. The emperor continued his developmental agenda, inaugurating fresh academic institutions, broadening the pedagogical infrastructure, and fostering manufacturing progress. Ethiopia emerged as a continental pioneer in air transport, with Ethiopian Airlines becoming one of Africa's preeminent carriers. The nation also solidified its position as a significant purveyor of coffee, with Ethiopian coffee earning acclaim in international markets for its superior quality and distinctive taste profile. However, these notable achievements were regrettably eclipsed by mounting challenges that the imperial government seemed either incapable or disinclined to resolve proficiently. Land tenure remained a pressing concern, with the vast majority of Ethiopian peasants continuing to toil as sharecroppers on vast tracts of land predominantly owned by nobles or the church. Urban unemployment was escalating as young people migrated to cities in pursuit of opportunities that frequently proved elusive. Regional inequalities were also growing more pronounced, with certain areas benefiting considerably from development programs, while others remained largely neglected and marginalized. The gravest predicament, however, emanated from the northern province of Eritrea, which had been integrated into a federal structure with Ethiopia in 1952, under an accord brokered by the United Nations. This federation was specifically intended to grant Eritrea a degree of self-governance while preserving its essential connection to Ethiopia. Nevertheless, Haile Selassie systematically diminished Eritrea's self-rule, culminating in 1962, when he officially incorporated the region as an Ethiopian province. This unilateral action directly led to the inception of an insurgent separatist campaign, an armed independence movement that would bedevil the Ethiopian state for the subsequent 3 decades. The Eritrean independence struggle proved exceptionally formidable for the imperial government because it amalgamated diverse wellsprings of opposition. There existed significant ethno-linguistic distinctions between Eritreans and other Ethiopians, pronounced faith-based schisms between the largely Muslim Eritrean lowlands and the Christian Ethiopian highlands, and fundamental political differences over the precise extent of self-governance that Eritrea should enjoy within the Ethiopian state. The emperor's primary response to the Eritrean challenge was predominantly martial, with Ethiopian forces attempting to quell the independence movement via coercive measures. This approach, however, proved broadly ineffectual. In fact, it inadvertently fortified Eritrean patriotic sentiment by generating heroic figures and starkly underscoring the imperial government's reluctance to remedy Eritrean dissatisfactions through political means. The protracted conflict also severely depleted resources that could have been judiciously allocated for national development and fostered an environment of martial readiness that would have enduring ramifications for Ethiopian politics. By the early 1970s, it became unequivocally clear that the imperial system was confronting a profound credibility predicament. The emperor, now in his 80s, was perceived as progressively disconnected from the urgent requirements and burgeoning ambitions of younger Ethiopians. The government's response to a catastrophic scarcity in the northern provinces during 1973 to 74 was universally condemned as insufficient and unfeeling. Global press reports of the famine, which vividly portrayed emaciated rural dwellers while the royal establishment persisted in its opulent existence, forged a potent portrayal of an administration utterly alienated from its citizenry. The ultimate unraveling commenced in early 1974 with a sweeping wave of industrial actions and public protests initiated by diverse segments of society: students, teachers, taxi drivers, and eventually military units. What began as demonstrations over particular dissatisfactions progressively transmuted into a broader, systemic indictment of the imperial system itself. The emperor's belated attempts to de-escalate the turmoil through accommodations and structural adjustments were widely interpreted as indications of vulnerability rather than genuine efforts at reform. The military committee that ultimately seized power, known as the Derg, meaning committee in Amharic, initially purported to be operating in allegiance with the emperor and the monarchy. However, it swiftly manifested that the military had its own distinct blueprint for remaking the Ethiopian social fabric. In September 1974, Haile Selassie was dethroned and confined to domestic custody. The man who had governed Ethiopia for more than 40 years, who had ascended to become a global emblem of continental self-respect and independence, was unseated from authority by a group of subaltern army personnel who professed to embody the Ethiopian people's yearning for transformation. The demise of Haile Selassie's reign signified the culmination of one of the world's most ancient royal houses and heralded the commencement of a new and tempestuous epoch in Ethiopian history. The illustrious Solomonic lineage, which had asserted its descent from King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba and claimed to have ruled Ethiopia for over 700 years, reached an abrupt cessation. The emperor himself perished while detained in 1975 under unsettled conditions that persist as a subject of dispute to this day. The Derg, presided over initially by General Aman Andom and subsequently by Colonel Mengistu Haile Mariam, vowed to update Ethiopia and to tackle the socio-economic quandaries that had afflicted the monarchical regime. They heralded a socialist upheaval, expropriated landholdings and key industrial sectors, and initiated sweeping initiatives to reconfigure Ethiopian communal structures. The nascent government also embraced a more assertive strategy regarding the Eritrean conflict and other geopolitical difficulties across the region. Her regional challenges. Nevertheless, the governance of the military regime, known as the Derg, emerged as significantly more despotic and oppressive when contrasted with the imperial framework it had supplanted. This formidable government systematically eradicated political dissent through a brutal campaign of intimidation and violence, infamously termed the Red Terror, a period that tragically claimed the lives of countless Ethiopians. Furthermore, the socialist doctrines espoused by the administration, despite their seemingly noble aspirations, frequently culminated in devastating economic repercussions, exacerbating existing food shortages and precipitating a pronounced economic downturn. The military leadership also contended with novel obstacles entirely absent during the imperial era. The geopolitical landscape of the Cold War, for instance, facilitated avenues for foreign interference, with the Soviet Union and Cuba extending crucial military assistance to the Derg, simultaneously as the United States lent its backing to an array of dissident factions. Concurrently, localized disputes escalated dramatically, as not only Eritrea, but also numerous other constituent regions experienced widespread armed insurrections challenging the centralized governmental power. The decade of the 1980s ushered in a fresh wave of calamities for Ethiopia, most notably a monumental famine that garnered significant global scrutiny and instigated a widespread humanitarian intervention. The haunting visual narratives of emaciated children, broadcast across television networks worldwide, fundamentally reshaped Ethiopia's global perception. It ceased to be recognized as the dignified, self-reliant African state celebrated for its triumph over European colonial powers, instead becoming a nation inescapably linked with destitution, starvation, and profound human misery. The military government's handling of this catastrophic famine drew extensive condemnation, widely perceived as both insufficient and driven by partisan considerations. The Derg regime faced serious allegations of weaponizing food assistance to subjugate dissenting territories and of allocating disproportionately vast resources to military expenditures rather than to urgent famine alleviation. While international aid operations undoubtedly preserved countless lives, they concurrently underscored the profound incapacities of the ruling administration and fueled an escalating tide of dissent against the military's governance. Towards the close of the 1980s, an undeniable truth emerged. The military government's grip on the nation's affairs was rapidly slipping. A multitude of armed insurgent factions were actively engaged across the entirety of the country, while the national economy lay in utter disarray and the regime's international backing steadily eroded. With the Cold War drawing to its conclusion, the Soviet Union, grappling with its own profound domestic challenges, commenced the curtailment of its vital assistance to the Derg, thereby rendering the military administration progressively more isolated on the global stage. The definitive collapse transpired with remarkable speed in 1991, when a powerful alliance of resistance movements, spearheaded by the Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Democratic Front, EPRDF, successfully seized control of the capital city, Addis Ababa, compelling Mengistu Haile Mariam to seek refuge outside the nation. This momentous overthrow of the military government signified the termination of 17 years of socialist governance and inaugurated yet another distinct epoch in Ethiopia's protracted historical narrative. The Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Democratic Front, EPRDF, under the astute leadership of Meles Zenawi, pledged to institute a democratic federal framework designed to mitigate the deep-seated ethnic and regional discord that had afflicted Ethiopia for many decades. This nascent administration subsequently enacted a constitution that formally acknowledged the inherent right of diverse ethnic communities to self-governance, a provision that notably encompassed the prerogative of secession. Such a constitutional stance represented a profound divergence from the approaches of preceding Ethiopian governments, which had consistently prioritized national cohesion and a highly centralized administrative apparatus. Among the initial pivotal decisions undertaken by the new government was the authorization for Eritrea to conduct a plebiscite on its sovereignty. Consequently, in 1993, The Eritrean populace overwhelmingly cast their ballots in favor of independence, thereby establishing Eritrea as an autonomous state following 3 decades of protracted armed conflict. While this outcome constituted a profound and sorrowful severance for numerous Ethiopians who had historically regarded Eritrea as an indispensable component of their homeland, it simultaneously eliminated a significant wellspring of contention, enabling both nations to concentrate on their respective trajectories of advancement. Throughout the 1990s and into the 2000s, Ethiopia experienced a period of remarkable economic expansion and infrastructural advancement under the stewardship of the EPRDF. The administration meticulously implemented a series of market-oriented economic adjustments, concurrently upholding a substantial governmental involvement in the strategic formulation of national development initiatives. A plethora of ambitious infrastructure undertakings were commenced, encompassing the construction of modern road networks, pivotal hydroelectric dams, and advanced telecommunication infrastructures. Concurrently, the nation's educational apparatus underwent a dramatic proliferation, evidenced by the establishment of numerous new universities and the widespread enhancement of access to primary schooling across diverse communities. Ethiopia additionally began to assume a more greater and proactive posture in both regional and global diplomatic arenas. The country evolved into a significant contributor to the African Union's peacekeeping endeavors, and frequently served as the venue for crucial international convocations. Ethiopian military contingents actively engaged in peace enforcement operations across various volatile territories, including Sudan, Somalia, and other zones of conflict, thereby underscoring the nation's steadfast dedication to fostering regional stability. Nonetheless, the EPRDF government simultaneously encountered considerable censure regarding its discernible authoritarian inclinations and the stringent constraints it imposed upon political dissent. Although electoral processes were conducted with consistent regularity, opposition parties frequently voiced grievances pertaining to systematic harassment and inequitable electoral practices. Freedom of the press remained circumscribed, and non-governmental civil society organizations faced considerable impediments to their operational scope. These persistent concerns invariably generated friction with international funding bodies and prominent human rights advocacy groups. Even as the government's comprehensive development blueprint yielded substantial triumphs in fostering economic prosperity, it inadvertently engendered a fresh array of formidable challenges. The burgeoning rate of population increase exerted immense strain upon the finite availability of arable land and vital natural resources. Concurrently, the accelerating phenomenon of urbanization gave rise to novel societal complexities. As substantial populations migrated from agrarian localities to metropolitan centers in pursuit of enhanced economic prospects. Furthermore, the pervasive issue of environmental deterioration emerged as an escalating apprehension, largely attributable to the extensive deforestation undertaken for agricultural expansion and burgeoning industrial initiatives. The year 2012 witnessed the unforeseen demise of Meles Zenawi, precipitating a significant leadership succession within the EPRDF. His designated successor, Hailemariam Desalegn, largely maintained the established policy trajectory. Yet he was confronted by an escalating confluence of difficulties stemming from heightened ethnic frictions, burgeoning political dissent, and persistent economic strains. A wave of public demonstrations subsequently began to manifest across disparate segments of the nation, notably concentrated within the Oromia and Amhara regions. These protests eloquently expressed a profound disaffection with the prevailing governmental directives and articulated insistent demands for more expansive political inclusion. The intensity of these demonstrations escalated considerably between 2015 and 2016, compelling the authorities to declare states of emergency and deploy security forces for often violent suppression. The administration's reaction to these widespread grievances garnered widespread condemnation from international monitors, thereby engendering a profound crisis of governmental legitimacy, a predicament strikingly reminiscent of those encountered by Ethiopia's preceding regimes. Confronted by an unrelenting surge of public and political exigencies, Hailemariam Desalegn tendered his resignation as prime minister in 2018. The subsequent appointment of Abiy Ahmed to the premiership in the same year heralded yet another pivotal juncture in the annals of Ethiopian history. Abiy, a youthful and charismatic figure hailing from the Oromo ethnic community, articulated a vision of profound, transformative reforms aimed at ameliorating the nation's entrenched political and societal predicaments. His initial actions included the liberation of numerous political detainees, extending an invitation for previously exiled opposition factions to repatriate, and initiating a comprehensive process of political system liberalization. Among Abiy's most impactful and celebrated early accomplishments was the successful mediation and resolution of the protracted dispute with neighboring Eritrea. In 2018, he embarked on a historic diplomatic mission to Eritrea, where he formally ratified a landmark peace accord with President Isaias Afwerki, thereby officially terminating the hostile standoff that had characterized relations between the two sovereign states since their border hostilities of 1998 to 2000. This extraordinary diplomatic feat garnered Abiy the distinguished Nobel Peace Prize in 2019, an unparalleled recognition, making him the inaugural Ethiopian laureate of this esteemed international honor. Nonetheless, the ambitious reforms spearheaded by Prime Minister Abiy inadvertently unchained potent societal forces that subsequently proved arduous to regulate. The relaxation of erstwhile political strictures precipitated a marked escalation in ethnic animosities and localized conflicts across numerous districts of the nation. Deep-seated and long-dormant grievances resurfaced with renewed vigor, prompting certain communal factions to advance territorial and political claims that directly imperiled the integrity of the established federal framework. The central administration consequently grappled with the formidable task of simultaneously upholding public order while diligently advancing its agenda of democratic transformation. The geopolitical landscape grew especially intricate within the northern Tigray region, where the Tigray People's Liberation Front, TPLF, a faction that had historically exerted considerable sway within the EPRDF coalition, perceived itself as increasingly sidelined by Abiy's progressive initiatives. The friction between the federal government and the Tigray Regional Administration intensified dramatically throughout 2019 and 2020, ultimately culminating in a full-scale armed confrontation in late 2020. This devastating conflict in Tigray represented an unprecedented peril for Ethiopia, a brutal internal struggle that imperiled the very fabric of its federal structure and held the ominous potential for national disintegration. The hostilities encompassed not only Ethiopian federal military units and Tigrayan regional combatants, but also involved Eritrean armed forces and irregular militia groups, drawn from adjacent territories. The humanitarian ramifications of this conflict were dire, resulting in the tragic loss of thousands of lives and the displacement of hundreds of thousands of individuals from their homes. As Ethiopia embarked upon the third decade of the 21st century, it found itself confronting a complex tapestry of tribulations, both historically recurrent and newly emergent. The nation continued to wrestle with the foundational existential inquiries that had persistently shaped its extensive trajectory. Namely, the delicate equilibrium between national cohesion and ethnic heterogeneity, the imperative of modernization juxtaposed with the preservation of cherished cultural legacies, and the intricate task of safeguarding national sovereignty amidst an increasingly interconnected global landscape. Nevertheless, these enduring dilemmas were now further compounded by a fresh constellation of variables: accelerated demographic expansion, the pervasive threat of climate change, transformative technological dislocations, and the fluid nature of contemporary international geopolitical dynamics. The grand narrative of Ethiopia, a land steeped in profound antiquity, remains far from its conclusion. This venerable nation, which has steadfastly endured the ascendancy and decline of multitudinous empires, the profound trials of colonial encroachment, and the tumultuous upheavals of revolution and armed conflict, persistently progresses and refines itself. The resilient populace of Ethiopia, having demonstrated extraordinary fortitude across their vast historical continuum, remains dedicated to forging a prospective future that reveres their rich heritage whilst enthusiastically embracing the boundless opportunities of the days to come, the possibilities of tomorrow. The captivating narrative of Ethiopia derives its profound intrigue not merely from its extraordinary longevity, a testament to endurance that few other civilizations can parallel across such an immense span of time, but rather from its unwavering and recurring principles of self-governance, strategic flexibility, and indomitable spirit. Throughout its illustrious history, stretching from the venerable ancient kingdom of Aksum to its contemporary manifestation as a federal republic, the people of Ethiopia have consistently showcased their remarkable aptitude for assimilating novel external influences while steadfastly safeguarding their intrinsic character, for skillfully adjusting to evolving conditions without compromising their fundamental tenets, and for triumphing over what often appeared to be insurmountable obstacles through sheer resolve and inventive problem-solving. Contemporary Ethiopia presents a starkly divergent landscape when compared to the historical epochs of Aksum or even the era presided over by Haile Selassie. Nevertheless, a constellation of defining attributes persists with remarkable constancy. A profound sense of national autonomy, the very impetus that propelled the Aksumites to construct their formidable trading empire, that ignited the courage of Menelik II to decisively vanquish the Italians at Adwa, and that fueled the unwavering spirit of resistance fighters throughout the arduous Italian occupation, perpetually molds Ethiopian perspectives on global affairs. Similarly, the deep-seated spiritual commitment, which famously inspired the meticulous excavation of the iconic rock-hewn churches at Lalibela, and which subsequently fortified Ethiopian identity through innumerable centuries of trials, retains its pivotal position within the fabric of Ethiopian communal life. Furthermore, the vibrant cultural inventiveness responsible for birthing its distinctive artistic expressions, literary works, and musical traditions continues its dynamic trajectory of flourishing and adaptation. Crucially, and perhaps above all else, the steadfast Ethiopian dedication to charting its unique trajectory. A course meticulously balanced, ensuring it is neither entirely detached from global interactions nor wholly subsumed by them, consistently serves as a fundamental compass, directing the nation's ongoing progress and evolution. Throughout its expansive history, Ethiopia has consistently functioned as a crucible where a rich tapestry of diverse cultures, spiritual beliefs, and ancestral customs have harmoniously coexisted and reciprocally enriched one another, thereby forging an identity that is both singularly distinct and profoundly invaluable. This venerable legacy of creative amalgamation and flexible adjustment potentially represents Ethiopia's most formidable asset as it navigates the complex exigencies of the 21st century. The globally cherished coffee bean, a profound gift from Ethiopia to the world, functions as an exquisitely apt metaphor for the nation's indelible contributions to the broader tapestry of human civilization. Much like the resilient coffee plant itself, Ethiopian culture possesses an intricate network of deep historical roots that have empowered it to withstand periods of severe drought and tumultuous societal storms, to adeptly acclimate to a myriad of diverse environmental and historical circumstances, and ultimately, to yield something truly enriching that enhances the daily existence of individuals across the entire globe. The compelling narrative of Ethiopia transcends the confines of a mere national chronicle. It is, in essence, an integral thread woven into the grander human saga, illustrating how diverse societies germinate, evolve, strategically adjust, and ultimately persist through time. As one might repose beside a comforting fire, perhaps cradling that very cup of aromatic Ethiopian coffee, and engage in thoughtful contemplation of this extensive historical odyssey through Ethiopia's past, one is afforded the opportunity to genuinely apprehend both the singular distinctiveness of the Ethiopian experience and the profound universality of its underlying themes. Invariably, every human society confronts the inherent dilemma of meticulously calibrating the equilibrium between time-honored traditions and the imperative for progressive change, of steadfastly upholding its intrinsic identity while gracefully accommodating novel circumstances, and of safeguarding its hard-won autonomy even as it actively participates in the interconnected global arena. Ethiopia's exceptionally protracted engagement with these fundamental societal quandaries therefore proffers invaluable insights and serves as a profound wellspring of inspiration for the entirety of humankind. The unfolding narrative of Ethiopia serves as a potent reminder that the discipline of history extends far beyond a mere compilation of chronological dates, significant military engagements, and the cyclical ascensions and demises of governing potentates. While these elements undeniably contribute to its intricate tapestry, history, in its more profound essence, illuminates the persistent human faculty for constructing significance, for meticulously forging cohesive communities, and for diligently safeguarding the invaluable legacies bequeathed by the past, while simultaneously striving towards the realization of a more propitious future. Fundamentally, it underscores the extraordinary capability of human societies to not only persist, but to genuinely flourish, even when confronted with adversities that initially appear utterly insurmountable. Ultimately, the grand chronicle of the Ethiopian Empire culminates as a profound testament to enduring hope, a fervent aspiration that national sovereignty can be steadfastly upheld even when confronted by staggeringly formidable adversaries. An optimistic vision that diverse populations can indeed coexist harmoniously in a spirit of tranquility and reciprocal esteem. And an earnest belief that venerable ancient wisdom, when judiciously integrated with cutting-edge modern knowledge, possesses the potential to forge advancements far surpassing the individual contributions of either. This narrative compellingly reiterates that the human spirit, much like the hardy Highland coffee plant, is endowed with profound foundational roots and an extraordinary capacity for resilience, enabling it to yield creations that are both aesthetically beautiful and profoundly enriching, even amidst the most arduous and testing circumstances. As the golden orb of the sun gracefully descends over the majestic Ethiopian highlands, painting the ancient topography with elongated, ethereal shadows where this truly exceptional civilization has thrived for more than 3 illustrious millennia, one is prompted to contemplate the extraordinary odyssey we have collectively undertaken through the annals of time, spanning the awe-inspiring towering obelisks of Aksum to the intricately carved rock-hewn churches of Lalibela, extending from the stately castles of Gondar to the gleaming, contemporary edifices of Addis Ababa, and encompassing the triumphant victory at Adwa alongside the complex exigencies of the current era. Ethiopia's multifaceted saga persistently continues its captivating revelation. The inextinguishable flame of Ethiopian civilization endures with unwavering persistence, occasionally oscillating with a gentle flicker amidst the tumultuous currents of change, at other times igniting into a brilliant blaze during periods of resounding triumph, yet consistently, never truly extinguished. This sacred flame has been meticulously nurtured and safeguarded by innumerable successive generations of Ethiopians, individuals who profoundly grasped their solemn responsibility as custodians of a heritage both precious and singular, a civilization unequivocally rooted in the African continent, while simultaneously constituting an integral component of the expansive human family. The venerable Highlands, which served as the genesis of our profound narrative, continue to reverberate with the spectral echoes of ancient monarchs and their consorts, still resonate deeply with the fervent supplications of innumerable devout pilgrims, and perpetually bear witness to the quotidian struggles and quiet victories of everyday individuals striving assiduously to forge more prosperous existences for themselves and their progeny. The ethereal morning mist persists in its graceful ballet over the towering peaks, symbolically conveying the collective dreams and heartfelt aspirations of a populace who have steadfastly cherished the knowledge that they are the proud inheritors of one of humanity's most ancient and truly extraordinary civilizations. Within the bustling, kaleidoscopic markets of Addis Ababa, vibrant hubs where enterprising merchants from across the African continent and beyond converge for vibrant commerce, the venerable spirit of ancient Aksum palpably persists. In the dynamic classrooms of schools and the esteemed halls of universities, where diligent young Ethiopians immerse themselves in subjects ranging from profound traditional literature to cutting-edge modern technology, the far-sighted educational legacy envisioned by emperors such as Menelik II and Haile Selassie demonstrably continues to yield abundant fruit. Furthermore, within the sacred precincts of churches, where devoted adherents assemble for worship in accordance with time-honored traditions that trace their origins back over 1,600 years, The unwavering faith that fortified Ethiopia through its most arduous epochs consistently furnishes both spiritual fortitude and invaluable moral direction. Crucially, however, Ethiopia's unfolding narrative is by no means confined solely to the diligent preservation of its illustrious past. It is equally and robustly dedicated to the energetic creation of its future. The burgeoning generation of young Ethiopians, who are actively pioneering new enterprises, cultivating innovative artistic expressions, developing groundbreaking technologies, and earnestly striving to resolve their nation's complex challenges, are collectively authoring fresh, vibrant chapters within this ancient and ongoing chronicle. They are imbued with the profound sagacity passed down from their forebears, the fundamental understanding that national autonomy must be perpetually earned and vigilantly safeguarded, that inherent diversity can serve as a powerful wellspring of collective strength rather than a catalyst for fragmentation, and that strategic adaptability coupled with unwavering resilience constitute the indispensable prerequisites for both sustained endurance and burgeoning prosperity. The formidable obstacles confronting contemporary Ethiopia are undeniably tangible and profoundly consequential. Issues such as burgeoning rapid population expansion, pervasive environmental degradation, escalating ethnic tensions, and entrenched economic inequality all demand immediate, concerted attention and the implementation of ingeniously conceived solutions. Yet, these present-day predicaments are not fundamentally distinct from the myriad trials that Ethiopia has confronted across its extensive historical trajectory. The venerable kingdom of Aksum, for instance, was compelled to skillfully adjust to evolving global trade routes and the emergence of formidable new rivals. Similarly, the medieval emperors faced the intricate task of judiciously reconciling the divergent demands emanating from various regions and disparate ethnic groups. Menelik II, in his era, was obliged to embark upon a program of national modernization while simultaneously ensuring the inviolability of his nation's independence. And Haile Selassie, in turn, had to deftly maneuver through the labyrinthine intricacies of the modern international diplomatic system while scrupulously upholding Ethiopian sovereignty. Consistently, every successive generation of Ethiopians has adeptly devised innovative methodologies to confront the specific challenges inherent to their respective eras, all while vigilantly safeguarding the most precious elements of their rich ancestral heritage. The present generation will, without question, emulate this enduring pattern, drawing profoundly from the deep, inexhaustible wells of accumulated wisdom, innate creativity, and indomitable resilience that have collectively nourished and sustained Ethiopian civilization for an astonishing span of over 3,000 years. Furthermore, the global community itself stands to glean profound insights from Ethiopia's extensive and storied experience. In an epoch where numerous societies grapple intensely with complex inquiries concerning national identity, cultural diversity, and the pervasive forces of globalization, Ethiopia's exemplary model, demonstrating how to steadfastly uphold cultural distinctiveness while actively and productively engaging with the broader international sphere, provides exceptionally valuable perspectives. The nation's unparalleled triumph in meticulously preserving its independence throughout the tumultuous colonial period powerfully illustrates the feasibility for smaller states to maintain their precious sovereignty. Even when confronted by seemingly insurmountable adversities, provided they possess the requisite political volition, strategic sagacity, and unwavering national cohesion to achieve such a feat. Ethiopia's rich spiritual traditions, which have skillfully managed to preserve their unique characteristics while simultaneously retaining an integral position within the expansive Christian family, present compelling lessons regarding how various faith communities can safeguard their inherent distinctiveness, even as they actively participate in comprehensive global religious discourse. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church's remarkable synthesis of established Christian theology with deeply ingrained local traditions and indigenous practices vividly demonstrates how universal spiritual truths can be eloquently articulated through specific cultural expressions without ever diminishing their fundamental essence. Moreover, the nation's vibrant artistic and literary legacies, which have perpetually undergone dynamic evolution while steadfastly upholding their unmistakable Ethiopian character, powerfully illustrate how cultures can retain their vitality and contemporary relevance by judiciously embracing progressive change while simultaneously venerating their foundational roots. Indeed, Ethiopian music, its distinctive visual arts, and its rich literary corpus persistently engage in a reciprocal dance of influencing and being influenced by prevalent global trends, all the while meticulously preserving their unequivocally and unmistakably Ethiopian identity. Ultimately, and arguably most profoundly, the enduring narrative of Ethiopia serves as a potent and invaluable reminder that the unfolding of history is by no means a predetermined trajectory. Rather, it underscores the fundamental truth that societies possess distinct agency and retain the critical prerogative to make deliberate choices regarding their responses to both formidable challenges and auspicious opportunities. One might observe that the people of Ethiopia, when confronted with the encroaching tide of Italian colonialism at Adwa, possessed the distinct option of capitulation. Similarly, those valiant resistance fighters who steadfastly persevered in their opposition to the subsequent Italian occupation might have, with different resolve, embraced cooperation with the foreign power. Furthermore, the sagacious leaders who embarked upon a journey to modernize their venerable nation while simultaneously safeguarding its cherished autonomy had the alternative paths of either complete detachment from global affairs or an unreserved adoption of Western paradigms. Indeed, at every critical juncture throughout Ethiopia's storied past, countless individuals and their collective communities exercised profound discretion, making consequential decisions that not only charted the course of their personal fates, but also indelibly sculpted the trajectory of their entire country, and occasionally exerted a significant influence upon the broader international landscape. The resounding triumph achieved at Adwa, for instance, ignited the flames of inspiration within numerous anti-colonial movements that spanned the vast continents of Africa and Asia. Emperor Haile Selassie's unwavering championing of international legal frameworks and the principle of collective security played an instrumental role in molding the structure of the global order that emerged in the aftermath of the Second World War. Moreover, Ethiopia's pivotal involvement in the establishment of the Organization of African Unity proved crucial in propelling the continent towards decolonization and fostering its subsequent progress. These monumental accomplishments, it is imperative to note, were far from predetermined or unavoidable. Rather, they sprang directly from the deliberate and informed decisions rendered by individuals who profoundly grasped their inherent capacity to forge their own future trajectory. This profound insight, the realization that the grand narrative of history is meticulously woven by the threads of human volition and deliberate choices, rather than being dictated by an array of impersonal, unyielding forces, stands as perhaps Ethiopia's most invaluable contribution to the global consciousness. It serves as a compelling admonition that humanity is not merely a collection of passive recipients of circumstance, helplessly buffeted by external pressures, but rather a dynamic cohort of active architects, fully empowered to construct the kind of world in which it aspires to reside. As one brings this historical exploration of Ethiopia to its culmination, it becomes pertinent to ponder the profound wisdom that this ancient civilization imparts regarding the intricate art of navigating existence successfully within a world characterized by its inherent complexity and myriad challenges. The enduring experience of Ethiopia strongly intimates the viability of simultaneously revering the legacies of the past, while enthusiastically embracing the unfolding opportunities of the future. It demonstrates the capacity to steadfastly uphold one's intrinsic identity, even while proactively interacting and engaging with diverse peoples and cultures. Furthermore, it exemplifies the judicious discernment required to safeguard truly valuable traditions and institutions while courageously undertaking necessary transformations. It must be acknowledged that the Ethiopian methodology for addressing these formidable challenges has not invariably been flawless, a standard no human society can ever truly attain. Nevertheless, its efficacy has been demonstrably remarkable across the sweeping expanse of its long-term trajectory. The undeniable reality that Ethiopian civilization has not only persisted, but indeed flourished for more than 3 millennia, demonstrating an extraordinary aptitude for adaptation in the face of innumerable shifts and vicissitudes, while rigorously preserving its core essence and distinctive character, stands as irrefutable testament to the inherent sagacity embedded within this particular modus operandi. The revered coffee ceremony, which continues to occupy a preeminent position at the very heart of Ethiopian social interaction, presents an exquisitely apt metaphor for this profound wisdom. This ritual, fundamentally, demands a measured pace. It categorically resists any attempt at hurried completion. Its very essence fosters an environment where individuals are drawn together, cultivating a profound spirit of communal belonging and reciprocal esteem. It meticulously upholds time-honored traditions while simultaneously providing ample scope for the flourishing of individual creativity and unique expression. Furthermore, it possesses the remarkable ability to transmute humble elemental components, the raw coffee beans, pure water, and vital fire, into a concoction that offers sustenance not merely to the physical body, but also to the very essence of the human spirit. In its unfolding, it meticulously carves out a sacred space conducive to meaningful dialogue, introspective contemplation, and genuine human connection. In parallel with the philosophy encapsulated by its iconic coffee ceremony, Ethiopian civilization has consistently maintained an intrinsic comprehension that life's most significant endeavors and attainments are fundamentally resistant to haste, that the collective strength and mutual support found within a community profoundly outweigh the singular accolades of individual accomplishment, that the venerable tenets of tradition and the dynamic impetus of innovation can, in fact, harmoniously coalesce, that seemingly ordinary constituents possess the latent potential to be elevated and reshaped into something inherently beautiful and deeply significant, and crucially, that dedicating ample time to forge genuine bonds and connect with fellow human beings remains an indispensable cornerstone for the flourishing and well-being of humanity itself. these profound insights, meticulously distilled from thousands of years of accumulated experience within the majestic Ethiopian highlands, retain an enduring resonance and pertinence in the contemporary era. Just as they did during the epoch of the legendary Queen of Sheba, or the industrious architects responsible for the rock-hewn churches of Lalibela. In a modern world characterized by its relentless velocity, intricate interconnections, and frequent fragmentation, Ethiopia's compelling example, manifested through its patient perseverance, unwavering community solidarity, ingenious creative adaptation, and profound spiritual rootedness, proffers a distinctive and compelling paradigm for how to navigate existence and achieve prosperity. Ultimately, the grand narrative of Ethiopia unfolds as a compelling testament to the indomitable triumph of the human spirit in the face of daunting adversity. It eloquently speaks to the formidable capacity of collective communities to assiduously safeguard their most cherished values and traditions, even while adeptly adjusting to ever-shifting circumstances. Moreover, it illuminates the tangible possibility of upholding one's distinctive identity and sovereign independence concurrently with engaging in meaningful and constructive interactions with the broader global community. This is a saga that unfailingly bestows a potent sense of hope and profound inspiration upon all who lend it an ear, irrespective of their personal origins or prevailing life situations. As the celestial tapestry of stars meticulously unfurls across the expanse of the Ethiopian highlands, mirroring its appearance for an immeasurable succession of generations, their gentle luminescence bathes a land that has bestowed upon the world such invaluable gifts as the invigorating brew of coffee, an unparalleled repository of ancient wisdom, breathtaking artistic beauty, and a poignant exemplar of how to steadfastly uphold dignity and preserve independence amidst the most formidable and overwhelming of challenges. These same stars illuminate a resilient populace that has never relinquished its intrinsic awareness of being the devoted custodians of something profoundly precious and utterly singular, an inheritance that transcends mere national boundaries and, in its deepest essence, belongs not exclusively to them, but to the entirety of humankind. The inextinguishable flame of Ethiopian civilization persistently glows with undiminished vigor, diligently nurtured by successive generations, who acutely comprehend both the profound gravitas of their ancestral legacy and the boundless array of opportunities that await them in the forthcoming years. This luminous beacon extends its radiant glow far beyond the confines of the Ethiopian highlands, casting its light upon the entire odyssey of human existence, thereby serving as a potent reminder to all observers that, armed with unwavering courage, discerning wisdom, and resolute persistence, it is indeed attainable to bring into being something truly magnificent and eternally enduring within this terrestrial realm. Thus, this narrative gracefully draws to a close at the very point of its commencement, accompanied by the tranquil caress of waves upon far-flung coastlines, by the ethereal ballet of morning mist gracefully ascending over venerable mountain peaks, and by the evocative fragrance of freshly roasted coffee beans, a scent that perennially wafts forth, imbued with the implicit pledges of nascent prospects and fresh starts. It is unequivocally clear that the unfolding saga of Ethiopia is by no means concluded. In fact, its most pivotal and defining chapters very likely await their inscription. Yet the bedrock upon which this enduring narrative rests has been meticulously constructed through millennia of profound human experience, unbounded creativity, and an unyielding spirit of resilience. Irrespective of the specific trials and auspicious possibilities that the future may usher in, the people of Ethiopia are poised to confront them with the same unwavering spirit demonstrated by their forebears, imbued with an abiding pride in their rich heritage, a steadfast confidence in their intrinsic capabilities, and an optimistic vision for the forthcoming generations. The ritual of the coffee ceremony has reached its natural conclusion, and the embers of the hearth fire now glow with a subdued intensity. Yet the overarching narrative of Ethiopia steadfastly perseveres. In some undisclosed corner of the majestic Ethiopian Highlands, a new life is currently entering the world, destined to bear the torch of this ancient civilization into the epochs yet to come. Concurrently, a diligent student is engrossed in the study of a glorious past, simultaneously nurturing aspirations of making invaluable contributions to an even more illustrious future. Elsewhere, an innovative artist is painstakingly crafting novel creations that pay homage to the profound beauty of antiquity. In the fertile fields, a conscientious farmer is meticulously sowing the seeds that will provide sustenance for the generation that follows. And, in countless homes, a family is converging for the evening repast, sharing cherished tales and heartfelt aspirations, thereby perpetuating the timeless human discourse that has been the very lifeblood sustaining Ethiopian civilization for more than 3 millennia. This multifaceted panorama, indeed, encapsulates the authentic essence and profound significance of the Ethiopian story. It is not merely the chronicle of regal figures engaged in martial conflicts, nor solely an account of triumphant victories and sorrowful defeats, or even the cyclical narrative of ascendance and decline. Rather, it is the vibrant, continuous saga of everyday individuals accomplishing feats of remarkable distinction, of cohesive communities diligently safeguarding their most cherished tenets while astutely modifying their practices in response to evolving circumstances, and fundamentally, of a civilization that has masterfully acquired the profound wisdom of how to both persevere and flourish across the vast sweep of centuries. This compelling narrative, while intrinsically belonging to the heritage of Ethiopia, concurrently resonates as a shared legacy for all of humankind, for it constitutes an integral thread within the grander tapestry of the human story, illustrating the intricate processes by which individuals and societies construct meaning, assiduously forge robust communities, and conscientiously transmit their foundational values to the generations yet to emerge. Ultimately, the profound account of the Ethiopian Empire transcends the mere recounting of historical events. It manifests as a powerful prophecy. It unfurls as an inspiring vision of the extraordinary accomplishments human societies are capable of realizing when they skillfully integrate a deep reverence for the past with an eager receptiveness towards the future, when they meticulously calibrate individual aspirations with the overarching imperative of community solidarity, and when they steadfastly uphold their unique and distinctive identity while simultaneously participating in meaningful and constructive interactions with the global arena. It is a narrative that forcefully impresses upon humanity the realization that its collective journey is far from its culmination, that an abundance of fresh chapters still await their inscription, novel challenges beckon to be confronted, and uncharted possibilities stand poised for exploration. The eternal flame persists in its radiant glow, and the compelling story continues its unfolding. The inherent vitality, akin to an inextinguishable flame, persists with an unyielding intensity, radiating its enduring warmth and light. And in doing so, the intricate chronicle of events unfurls its subsequent chapters, ensuring the continuous progression of the compelling narrative.